Hello.
Yeah, that's your
Yeah.
name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's some deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
When you're
the ghost, and
275
that's
pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah.
You know,
He's like,
he's up there slapping, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's right. I know.
What'd you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize. Remember this?
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pertinier Outdoors. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Log Talk Podcast. This is Billy, and I am looking forward to bringing you this conversation with my Uncle Chris and his buddy Brian as we dive into we're kind of reflecting on their Colorado hunt for mule deer and elk, and I think that will be a fun conversation. And if you, as I'll mention in the beginning of this podcast, if you have not heard the conversation with those guys before they went out west, I'd encourage you to go back and check out, I believe it's actually our physically our third episode. I don't know if I called it episode 2 or whatever I called it. But it would be Gearing Up for Colorado is the name of the episode. So go back and check that out as we dove into this, talking about what these guys are looking forward to, what their anticipations were. So this podcast is going to be kind of a reflection of their whole trip and everything that they experienced. We get into gear, so about an hour and 20 minutes in, we kind of start talking more about. We get off the story of kind of all the stuff that they went through, and then we start talking a little bit about the gear and some different things about the trip that they took away from it, in a reflection of it. So you'll find in their story, it's pretty insane how much stuff that they went through. Just adversity. There was a lot of crazy stuff that happened. They, at the end of the day, they really didn't have that much time to hunt. But you'll hear in their story that they did make the best of the trip, and it sounds like they all stayed very positive and just kept going. And they ended up having, several good opportunities and got into elk, which is pretty awesome on just, really short time period allowed for them to get out there and get after it, with being their, for the most part, their first time doing it. Uncle Chris's first time in the Rockies chasing elk ever. So pretty cool story you'll hear from those guys. But want to kind of run through kind of a little bit of events calendar, some things that we got coming up. February is a little bit quiet. I don't think there's a whole lot happening in February, at least at this point, that I'm seeing. But I guess just a quick recap. This past week, I was able to go to the Public Land Grouse film showing in Syracuse, New York, and that was a great turnout. I think there was it was somewhere maybe around 45 to 50 people. I think the rough number estimate was 40, but there was definitely, I think there was a little bit more than 40 people there. And it was a great turnout, a great film, and it was very, motivational to think about a lot of the things that we have been discussing on this show about the impact that we all can have now. As we move forward, my generation, I feel like we have a lot of responsibility to get out there and be aware of some of the challenges we're seeing, on public land, but also just, conserving some of these species. And grouse is a pretty cool bird species, an upland bird species that I don't know much about. So it was a cool, 30, 40-minute film if you have the ability to check it out. If you're listening to this out of New York State and, the film tour is coming near you, I would definitely recommend you check it out. So that was a great event, and as always, it's cool to interact with everybody that kind of the community of BHA members, and it seems to be growing, which is very encouraging. So that's that. Great event there. Really enjoyed it. Kind of looking forward, we've got in the first week of March, we got the Western New York Sport and Travel Expo, and that'll be at the Hamburg, I think it's the off at the fairgrounds, the Erie County Fairgrounds, but it's right at the where the Hamburg Casino is. So I went to that. I've been to it a few times. Went to it last year. BHA had a booth, so I worked that a couple days last year, and I'm sure we'll be involved with working that again this year. So make sure you go check out that show. It's really cool to be able to go to. It's a decent sized show, nothing massive, but it's a good sized show, and there's a lot of outfitters there from around the country and around the world. So if you're looking to take a trip out of state, whether it be Maine, I know that my uncle and a couple of my uncles have been pretty engaged with one of the outfitters that comes to that show, Woody's Guide Service, and that's up in Maine. And they go bear hunting there every September. I have a really good relationship with those guys. My family does. And guys, sent some outfitters from Colorado that I believe my Uncle Chris and Uncle Tim are going to try to go out with to Colorado in 2021 for some elk hunt with this outfitter. So it's a great opportunity to go and meet some of these outfitters and also meet some of the brand reps and things of that nature. And also, something like BHA, stop by the booth and meet some of us that are representing the organization and, talk public lands and conservation and get yourself a membership. So good stuff there. We're going to try to line up. I think we've got a date nailed down for our first pint night for the Buffalo area. So March 12th, we're looking to do a pint night at Rusty Nickel Brewing in West Seneca. So I'm working with Emily Josefiak. I think she's got a new last name because she got married, but Em and I went to college together, and she's a BHA member, and she's helping us put together some events there. We did one over the summer for some wild game cooking event. We did that back over the summer, so we're going to go back to Rusty Nickel again. They've been very supportive of us, so look forward to that. There'll be more posts on social, and we'll be talking more about it. We want to spread the word at the expo, and then the pint night will be the following week. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you're around the Western New York area. On the last episode, we talked with Brian a lot about NWTF and the banquets. Just a reminder that this is banquet season. The majority of them, I was looking around the area in Western New York where I live, and the majority of the banquets are between now and probably I would say the middle of April. So definitely encourage you to, get involved, check those out. They're a great time. I think you'll really enjoy it. And I guess lastly, I would like to just remind everyone to check out the link in our bio, both on Facebook and Instagram. It's called a link tree. If you use that link, it will drive you to another website, which gives you a bunch of different links. The top one is for our podcast. So if you want to stream that off the internet when you're at work or sitting at home on your computer, you can stream it from there, or you can use any of the store links that are in that link tree. And if you purchase anything through those stores, us at Pert Near Outdoors get a little bit of credit so that we can help continue to keep this podcast and all the stuff that we're doing up and rolling. So really appreciate everyone's support, continuing to have a great time with this, and I will leave it at that. Enjoy the conversation and have a good week. Thank you.
Can you hear me? This thing's on my collar.
I can hear you.
Okay.
It sounds great on your collar.
It seems kind of weird.
No, it's just pretend it's not there.
Okay.
If you make you feel better, clip it to your glasses, and then you'd be freaking locked in. All right, so we are sitting here. This is your host Billy, and I'm sitting down with my Uncle Chris and Brian Davis. And if you remember, I think it was episode 2. We had these guys on, and we talked extensively about their trip out west that was quickly approaching to Colorado for Brian was hunting archery elk, and Uncle Chris was hunting archery elk and had an archery mule deer tag.
Yes.
So we that's kind of where we left off. We ran through that whole thing. So if you did not listen to that episode yet, would recommend you go back and check it out. A lot has happened with Pert Near Outdoors since. We've put out 20 plus podcasts. So it's funny looking back. There's a lot. We've gained a lot of listeners over the last 2-3 months. And especially in the last month, we've really picked up some good momentum. So looking back, there's a lot of folks that didn't listen probably to the first episode. So if you haven't, hit pause here, go back and check that one out. So we are at Uncle Chris's house, sitting down in his little den, his little, I don't know, man cave, I'd call it.
Yeah, you could call it that.
It's warm. The stove is cranking.
There's a bear and a deer on the wall, and an old Civil War musket. And
yeah.
and a nice coal fireplace. It's about 80 degrees, so.
Yeah, this feels like a good place to do a podcast.
It certainly does.
So what's up, guys? How are you? How are you doing? You survived the holidays. We're in the winter depression stage with no hunting to do.
Yeah, we made it through season. It honestly was a crazy time because all the preparation for the elk hunt. And then honestly, after that, we ran into deer season, and I think you had me on one stern deer season. I wounded that buck, but I hunted hard this year. It was a great deer season. I did end up Thanksgiving, got a nice buck. You were there for that, but man, I hunted hard. I mean, it was just exhausting almost towards the end, and it is changing back to not hunting. It takes a while, that transition.
It does.
I learned a lot last year. It was fun. It was a great year. It was a blast. Going to Colorado definitely was a highlight.
Move that microphone if you can, maybe angle, because when you're turning your head and talking, it's.
Yeah. I can do that. I can move it over on this side.
So, kind of, Uncle Chris just gave a rundown of his emotions and where he's at.
Sure.
Brian, how was your? We actually, you and I haven't connected at all. Really,
we haven't connected at all, just with the exception of social media and text messages and stuff. So, yeah, just to piggyback off Chris, I mean, we rolled right into hunting season. I was unfortunate to not get in contact with you guys during whitetail season in the southern zone. So that was unfortunate, but maybe next year. There's always next year. We all got our own family traditions and lineages that we try to upkeep and everything throughout the year. So, but myself, I had a good whitetail season. I ended up getting 2 bucks. My son shot his very first deer ever and very first buck, and it happened to be Adirondack buck with a rifle.
Awesome, good for him. Is he mounting it?
Oh yeah, it's
family tradition.
It's at the taxidermist right now. It should be done probably within a week or two. So
nice.
I should be getting a phone call any day now.
Awesome.
So yeah, we rolled in the holidays after that and survived the holidays, and now I got a couple more weeks, and we'll go up for our annual ice fishing trip to our cabin in the Adirondack. So we got some things that we do to get us through the winter lull of trying to get back in the woods, turkey season, and all that good stuff. So.
You got to get out and start walking. I went out yesterday to grab a couple of trail cameras that were out, and I found a hell of a shed.
Really?
Yeah, I should have brought it with me. I didn't think about it, but
it looked like a nice one.
Oh my god! I mean,
and
when
I
should have brought the
mule deer shed.
The mule deer shed I found.
Oh, you found one on the trip?
Yeah, we'll get into that. I got it in my office. I should have brought it, and so we could have thrown it on the social media.
It would have been nice, but now we can't. If you
I'll
don't bring
take a picture
here,
of it and send it to you.
Maybe I'll slide that in there.
Before you publish the podcast, I'll get you a photo of it.
All right, good. That sounds like a deal. Yeah, that horn I found yesterday. Just real quick on that. I mean, the mass. I thought it was big, and then I brought it home and I put it next to a couple of the shed antlers I had at the house that were, I thought, pretty decent bucks. They're nothing giant, but good 2.5, maybe 3-year-old bucks. And like the bases on this thing, and it's real thick and webbed, almost going out to the G2, and it's got a fork, a split G2, and then the G3 is it's weird. It's kind of almost hooked down, so it looks like a muley shed. Yeah. I was on the phone with my wife. I'm walking through the woods, and I'm like, Sarah, I think I just found a shed. And I'm walking up to him, like, holy shit, it's a big shed. I'm like, oh my god. So I went through all my camera pictures I have from that area, and I don't have that buck on camera, and I had a camera 300 yards from there. It's interesting,
And this is over at the camp?
This is at a secret spot.
Oh.
It's public land, secret spot.
I met your per near page. I don't see the picture on here.
It was on our story. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to post some pictures later on it, but anyway, so the reason why we're getting together primarily here today is to kind of go through a rundown of you guys' Western trip. And Chris, that was your first out-of-state hunt like that. So I guess we'll probably start there. What was the, heading out there, you and David drove out, and everybody was kind of caravanning in their own way. And I guess just take us from there, because I really haven't heard a ton about the trip either. So I guess let's just kind of start off with you, kind of the journey out there.
I mean, my travel piece, we were going to leave Friday. I had to wait for David to finish college classes. And then he was actually going to drive home from Vermont. meet me here. So we weren't going to start our drive till like 7 o'clock at night. And so I took Friday off, and work was super busy at the time. So I was kind of prepared, but Friday was all day packing. And it was just like grabbing Ziplocs. Okay, I'm going to throw more batteries in this Ziploc. I didn't want to go unprepared. So I was envisioning living out of this backpack, sleeping in a tent. I wanted to be over-prepared, regardless. And, it was, we can get into that later, but the backpack was heavy. Heavier than it needed to be.
Yes, been there.
So Friday was a lot of craziness, got packed, and I was excited. And I was in contact with Brian, and I think you left earlier in the day.
We did, yeah.
His goal was to go meet his buddy, I think, in Kentucky. And then David and I were going to drive through the night. And bottom line is Saturday night, all of us were going to meet in Colby, Kansas, which is the western part of Kansas. So David got home, we packed up quick, and we hit the road. And we actually stopped by your dad's house, and we had to pick up a couple things there. But, it was a great trip. It was a lot of excitement for me and David. And honestly, David's been away at college for 3 years. So it was great for me and him to spend 18, 20 hours in the truck together to, kind of reconnect. He taught me a lot about Post Malone. So I discovered that I don't mind Post Malone. The music was pretty good at 2 a.m.
Keep you awake.
Yeah, we listened to a lot of Joe Rogan. We drove through the night. We basically would drive in 4-hour shifts. And he would drive, I would drive, take little naps. We made it to, I don't know, it was Indiana or Illinois. But we made it in there, got light out, stopped to have breakfast, kept driving. And, we basically got to Colby, Kansas by about 5 p.m. And these guys got there soon after us. It was exciting.
On Saturday?
On Saturday night.
Wow, that's pretty good. For just two guys driving, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah. And the funny thing about the drive, me and David were joking the whole way. Everything looked like upstate New York. Like nothing really changed until we got to Kansas. And we got into those plains, and all of a sudden it flattened out. It was more grasslands. That's when we started to really see the change.
And now you guys took...
we took 70.
Started taking the southern route.
Interstate 70 is what we took.
Through St. Louis, Indianapolis.
Okay, because each time we've gone, we've stayed north. Mm-hmm. And what?
On 80?
80.
On 80.
And 80, you go right through Iowa and Nebraska. And
right.
That doesn't look anything like upstate New York. I
Right.
mean, it is flat as a baby's ass. And is a baby's ass flat? I don't know. That was a bad reference.
It could be.
Yeah, it depends on how much they do up downs.
Malnourished.
Yeah, like my son. That's another topic. But that drive is long and flat. Like when you get out there,
it is. And it was fun going out because there was a lot of excitement. And like I said, me and David had a lot of great conversations. We listened to some great Joe Rogan podcasts, different things, talked about the hunt. The big thing about the trip for David is he was not hunting. He was coming just for the experience. But he's really gotten into filming and stuff. So he brought some camera equipment, well, really to go along with his iPhone. And he was very excited about making a movie about this hunt and videoing and taking pictures. So that was kind of his angle. So it was a lot of fun as we got out there and the excitement was building. Of course, we all met at the hotel Colby, Kansas, with Sam and Brian and his son. And, I had a couple beers. We're all pretty tired. When you haven't slept much, you've been driving that long. It was nice to sit in the hotel and have some beers.
Yeah.
And then the next day was picking up Joe at Denver Airport, which was about 2-hour drive? Wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it's 2.5 hours, something like that.
So
yeah.
Sunday was, the plan of attack for Sunday was to pick up Joe at the airport, which we did successfully, and then head south on Route 25 right down to Trinidad. And we didn't get to the hunting area till, it had to be 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock?
It was right around dinner time, 4 or 5 o'clock. But right when we expected, though, really.
Yeah.
Based upon the plan. So it was
probably my biggest surprise was between the two areas we hunted while we were in Colorado is the Trinidad area was very reminded me. We literally drove into New Mexico to turn around and come up into this wildlife area, and it looked like New Mexico. It was very cool, very strange landscape. It wasn't like the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it was
high desert.
Yeah.
High desert. And I found out the next day very unforgiving. It felt like the sun was about 2 feet above my head.
Yeah.
But the nighttime was cold. I couldn't drink enough water when we were out there that first day hunting. But backing up a little bit, when we got there, we sighted in our bows, reconfirmed, loaded up, and it was not a long walk in there, just a couple miles. But at 7,000 feet or whatever, after 2 days of driving, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
All of us with these big packs on, and pretty soon it was dark. We're hiking in the dark to get to our campsite. But it was, it was a lot of excitement. It was fun. Like when I got there, I'm like, I can't believe I'm in Colorado getting ready to start this hunt.
Right.
To hunt in another state like that was so exciting.
Anticipation and that excitement can power you through a lot of things, that you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah.
Like,
It certainly can.
yeah, you're exhausted. You've been sitting for 48 hours and you just hit the ground running. You don't really think about it.
You do. And one thing that we discovered, like, I didn't realize how sick Sam was. And I knew he had a cold, but when we were hiking out to the campsite, he was falling back. And, I didn't know. I'm like, okay, maybe he's a little out of shape or whatever. But the poor guy was really sick. And I don't know if you want to cover in the morning when we woke up.
So he was sick when you guys got there.
Yeah, so I'll just go over my timeline real quick. So my oldest son and I, Jordan, we left our house on that Friday, and we met my buddy Sam from active duty who had a archery elk tag. We met him at his sister's house in right on the border of Ohio and Kentucky, right on the Cincinnati area. So we spent the night there, and then met up with Chris and Dave in Colby, Kansas the next afternoon, like Chris said. So the whole ride from Sam's sisters to heading out west, like I could tell Sam was getting sick. He's sneezing, he's coughing, and he did mention in the truck that he's got 2 kids, a boy and a girl, at his house, and they were sick earlier the week before. So he just was gradually getting worse during the trip. So by the time we got to Colby, Kansas, he was pretty well under the weather. We, like Chris said, we had a couple beers, and then we hit the hay. We got up the next day and went and got Joe at the airport, like Chris said. And the ride down to Trinidad, you could tell he had a fever. He's freezing, with the heat blasting.
It's not good.
It wasn't good. He was not in good shape. So when we got to the trailhead to start walking to the base camp, his adrenaline was pumping. He was looking a little better, but once he put that pack on, and we're at more of an elevation up here in New York than he is. He lives in Virginia, so he did as much elevation training as he possibly could in the Blue Ridge Mountains, about an hour from his house. So
Yeah.
he did quite a bit, but we all know, you and I know, of being out there out west, is the only way to train for it is to go out there and train for it. Like nothing you can do back here
No.
that even comes close to preparing you physically to going out west on a backpacking hunt. So walking in, like Chris said, it was only about 1.5 miles, 2 miles into where we wanted to base camp, and I think we made it probably half of that. And that's when Sam was like, I can't go any farther. You guys can go ahead and go on, but I'm going to spend the night here, and tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. We did not go to our original campsite. I forgot about that.
He was going to walk out and check himself into urgent care or ER. So I knew then when he told me that, just knowing Sam from the past, that he's ill. Like, he's a law enforcement officer. That the guy does not have tiny heart syndrome, and he's hurting unit. So, so we established base camp, and I don't know, we kind of just sat around for an hour or so.
Yeah, I think we had those little mini bottles of liquor, like
Yeah.
some whiskey.
So
You couldn't start a fire.
we couldn't start
Because
a fire.
it's so dry.
It was
Yeah.
pretty dry, and even out west was pretty wet this year.
Yeah.
when
Like you
the
said, it's
elks-
high desert, and they don't mess around. It's a
yeah,
burn
it's high
ban. You
desert.
can't-
There was a fire ban again in the unit that we were hunting in. So we were to bed pretty early, just due to the drive that we had.
It was probably 10 o'clock.
and then was Dave getting sick that night too, or
He was
that-
okay that night. It was the
that
second
night?
Yeah.
He was okay.
Yep.
So, the next morning we got up, and we ended up splitting up.
Yep, you guys went
Chris-
up top, right?
Yep, Chris and Dave. Chris had the mule deer tag for that unit we were hunting, so they wanted to concentrate on mule deer. So Dave and Chris went off kind of on their own in the area where last year we had hunted this same unit, where we had saw some mule deer, hoping to grab something. And then Sam went out to check himself into the hospital, and then
Poor bastard.
myself, my oldest son Jordan, and Joe kind of did the same thing we did the year before when we shot the cow elk. We went to the top of the mesa, the tabletop mountain, and kind of worked our way down. We wanted to get in one of the other drainages that was past the one drainage where we shot the elk last year, and lo and behold, we kind of got monkeyed up on the map and wound up in the same exact drainage.
Oh shit!
Well,
It was
we
destiny.
kind of got
It was a
kind of
long
got
ways.
cliffed.
It was very far.
You know, there was some areas where we kind of got, I forget what you call it, but we got cliffed off where we couldn't get down into the drainage that we wanted to. So once we figured out, oh man, this is going to drop us down into the same area as last year, we kind of just said screw it and went with it.
Yeah.
And there was some elk sign in there, nothing super fresh. It was probably a couple weeks old.
Yeah.
You know, this was towards the later half of September this year, and last year we went the last couple days of August, like the opening day week. And I think there was probably some additional hunting pressure from the first couple weeks of the season. So
Yep.
I think the herds that were living there probably were bumped out of there from previous pressure. So
Yeah.
and then once the hunting day was over, that's when we basically all decided
met,
that
yeah.
we were going to pick up and go to our next area. But I'll let Chris talk about
Yeah.
him and Dave's mule deer
So
extravaganza. Yeah.
So B and I spent $400. I spent $400 on this mule deer tag. I was hell bent on getting a mule deer, and we were seeing mule deer. We were seeing does.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I mean, and I discovered these mule deer. I mean, I could have shot a doe all day long. They would like see us. They'd be 20 yards away, and they'd move to like 25 yards away and stand there, broadside, dead still, staring at us, like forever. I'm like, well, this is not like deer back home. This is easy. So the whole day we were not in contact with them. They went up on the mesa, which was a long ways away. Like, this place was bigger than I thought. And I know he told me that. I looked at the map and studied maps. Now I'm like, well, this doesn't look that big, but it's a pretty big area. So me and David stayed at the base of the mesa, kind of on the side hill, and there were some knobs and little ridges. And it was the strangest landscape, very harsh, like lots of rocks. There was a lot of bushes about 5 foot tall. And I remember there's two types of bushes. One had thorns and would tear you up, and the other bush did not have thorns and was pleasant to walk through. So me and David are walking around there, and it got hot. You know, it was freezing cold at nighttime. But during the day, you know, we're hiking around, and I'm like consuming water. And I'm like really shocked how much, and I'm like, geez, we actually had to hike back out for more water the first day. That night, me and Dave came back, hunted our way out, because we had actually saw mule deer walking in the first night. Went out, got water, talked to that old timer who was staying there, came back in.
Was there any water up in there, like springs or streams or anything, or it was
There was
just
the one little one, but I mean, it wasn't much.
desert?
There was some, but not.
It was easier to go back to my truck and get bottled water or
No
something,
kidding.
honestly. But
Which that's a pain in the ass. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a
it
whole
was.
other.
It was a
I've
pain in the
never.
ass.
I don't know if I'd want to hunt somewhere like that.
it
unless
was
it was. That's the only place to hunt.
It was a pain.
It was a pain, but I'm glad I experienced it. We hunted hard that first day, and the first day I don't think we saw any mule deer. And we're trying to figure the landscape out. And you got a bow and arrow, and you're trying to get through these bushes. We found tons of trails. We did find a spot after lunch we set up where we could glass, and I had a poncho. I actually had like a camouflage tarp. The sun was so strong that we had to get underneath the tarp. Every tree there was like had been burnt. So it was like, imagine a landscape with trees. There was no leaves. There was no cover. Everything had been burnt. It was just like a forest fire had come through.
Right. I think that area burned in like 2016 or 2015.
Looked like it.
Because when you were getting ready to go down
The last time
there.
I did the research, I think the last one was 2011.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. That I had found
Yeah.
doing e-scouting. I think it was 2011, yeah.
So we had fun that first day. Probably the coolest part was our very first morning. We left the tent. We found there was a couple little ridge lines, and you could set up on them. We found like a fallen tree in the dark, and you could look. I could probably take a 40 or 50-yard shot down below. So we sat up there, beautiful. Watched the sun come up. Hunted there, and as the sun comes up, it got a little warmer, got more comfortable. Well, I left David by the log, and I decided to walk back and peek over the other side of the ridge line. And in daylight, I'm standing there, and I look over, and right in the middle of this ridge, there's like where a tree had been cut off. There's a stump. There's a bottle of whiskey on the stump. And there was lead slinger whiskey that had been opened, and only a little bit had been drank. So that kind of cracked me up. I'm like, what the hell's a bottle of whiskey doing out here?
Right.
So we did, I sniffed it, and it smelled like whiskey. So I figured I was going to take the whiskey, and I said, somebody probably left it here just to enjoy the spot. So we each took a small hit off it and just left it there.
Nice.
But so that was a high point. So we hunted all day, and basically we met these guys back at camp at the end of the first day. They were exhausted. I mean, I think Coburn, Joe went right to sleep.
Yeah, he was.
Like, we got back to camp, and Joe was in his tent, and we sat up. He had the little propane light or whatever, so we had a little bit of light. Once again, I had a little Jim Beam or whatever it was, a little whiskey. We just sat there, and we had, we didn't have much for food. It was all like trail mix and MREs. And then we went to sleep that night, and they were going to get up and leave the next morning. Me and David were going to hunt the morning and meet them back at the trucks at lunchtime.
So this was Tuesday?
It was Tuesday.
Okay.
So now we've moved on to Tuesday. Our big concern was Sam. I guess we're downplaying really how concerned for Sam we were, because we didn't have cell phone coverage. So Brian was going to leave immediately so he could go find Sam, make sure he was okay. And then me and David were going to hunt and meet him at noon. So the cool thing about the middle of the night, and I think I'm the only one who heard it, but it was really cold. It was hard to sleep at night. And I mean, I had sleeping bags. I was in my clothes. And I feel bad because I bought Dave a really cheap tent that just had like a little fly over it, and there was a lot of mesh. That poor kid was freezing.
Oh my
But
God.
I woke up in the middle of the night to like elk bugling. And it was the coolest thing. I was hearing elk bugle across the valley. And I mean, honestly, that's probably one of my favorite memories of the hunt. Me like coming awake and hearing an elk bugle. I remember I got up to go to the bathroom, and Brian, I'm like, Brian, did you hear that? He's like, what? I'm like, there was an elk bugling. I mean, it was just really cool. And
When
I'm
you
like,
hear it, now that was your first time hearing it, like
Yes.
in the wild.
Yes.
What was your? Because I'll never forget the first time I
Excitement.
heard it. What was your? Like,
I was incredulous. I couldn't believe I was hearing it. And I'm like, well, they are, they're nighttime animals. I'm like, because we hadn't seen any during the day or much sign. I don't know where they were, but I wasn't imagining. I heard elk bugles, and then I heard one farther off, and I was like, it was just the coolest thing to actually hear it. So I was a little bit fired up the next morning, because I'm like, man, I heard elk bugle. I don't know where they are. But
they're here. Like,
They're
know
here.
they're there. They're
Yeah.
within 1,000 yards. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, one of them sounded damn close. So,
Yeah.
so basically the next morning we got up. David did not have a good night. He did not sleep well. He had a really bad headache. So we got out kind of late. Like, these guys, it was daylight. I didn't want to pack up in the dark. So we packed up, and me and David took off. And as we were hunting down this old road, we came across like 3 doe about 100 yards above us.
Now, was your tag, was that either sex?
No,
Or was that
just-
was
just
buck
buck.
only?
Yeah. So we really took our time. We snuck up through there. They disappeared in some of those thick bushes. We went up top this this knob, which was at the end of the canyon, the drainage. Once we got up there, it was beautiful. You could see right down the drainage where you shot your elk.
Yep.
But we snuck down the hill. We couldn't find the deer. We came back up, and then it was probably about 10 in the morning. The sun was beautiful out. David laid down, actually went to sleep. He wasn't feeling good, so I just kind of hung out. And then we decided to hike back.
Did you just say hunt out?
Hey now,
But I'm wondering.
But we were
is
going to
it-
hunt on our way.
Yeah,
out.
but so we talked about being hunt over,
Yeah.
and now I thought you just said hunt out.
Oh.
So is that like hanging out while you're hunting?
Yeah,
Is that what that is?
that is.
Okay, the vocabulary is growing. That's all.
Yeah, we got to expand our vocabulary.
I think I'm hunting out. When somebody's like, "What are you doing?" I'm hunting out.
Yeah, just hunting out.
Okay, proceed. Sorry.
So, so we actually we threw our packs back on, decided, and now we got our full packs because they're the camp and everything. So we're like, let's head back to the trucks. Well, on the way back to the trucks, we knew there was a spot. It was kind of off the side of the trail, and it was like thick bushes and kind of marshy in there. And then there was actually a nice little forest above that. Maybe went 100 yards up this side hill. We had saw a doe there coming in 2 days ago. So we actually snuck in there, and we could hear something in the bushes below us. So I actually snuck ahead, and then I told David to get down in there and try to push it out to me. And actually, I went down in, he went ahead of me, and then he came back. He's like, there's a mule deer out here. So I got back on the road, I came down, there was a big doe, huge doe, and they had a little one with it too. And the thing was broadside, 30 yards. And it finally it wasn't even that spooked, it just took off. So David feels like crap now. He's got a headache, he feels horrible. And I made him go back down in. I'm like, I'm gonna go old school. You need to push this because if I can get a mule deer, so I snuck down in there.
I got a $400 tag in my pocket. We're trying to.
Yeah.
We're heading out of here.
So there had to be, I bet you it was only 30 yards of thick stuff. You couldn't even see in it. And I'm telling you, I could hear a deer in there. David got on the other side, and David couldn't even get in there. And I was waiting because I had two laneways. I'm like, he's gonna push this deer out. If it's a buck, I'm gonna nail it. It must have escaped out the other side. We never saw it. It was amazing. I could not get in there. Couldn't see it, but I could hear it. So at that point, we said, okay, we're done. Let's head back to the trucks. And we hiked out. When we got back to the trucks, these guys were there. And that's when walking out, I realized how bad Dave was. Like, he was ready to throw up. He had a really bad migraine.
Do you think that was elevation sickness or?
I think elevation, and he doesn't do well without sleep.
Yeah.
So he was really hurting on sleep, and I think the elevation too.
As he grows up, he'll learn to do without sleep.
Yeah. And he did better. The rest of the story of this trip, he learned to go off like 4 hours a night. And when we got to the cabin, to the second place, we didn't get much sleep. We would drink until 10 or 11, go to sleep, get up at 4 a.m. And I felt great. I felt great.
It was an eventful trip.
Yeah.
So
So he brought us burgers. I must give him kudos. He brought us some cheeseburgers from someplace. And
yeah,
it's
so
phenomenal.
that's the morning when Chris and Dave were mule deer hunting. Joe, myself, and my son Jordan, we went out first thing from base camp out to the trailhead. We went to the local town because Sam had, once we got out to the trailhead and we got signal, we were able to get in touch with Sam, and he had gone to the doctor and then the previous day and then got himself a hotel room. So he got prescribed some medication. We told him what the plan was, that we were all going to link up back at the trailhead eventually and move to the other area. So we went and linked up with him. We got some fast food, brought it back to the trailhead. And then that's when Chris and Dave came out to the trailhead, and then Dave was the next person that was sick. So Sam he had, I don't know, at that time probably 18, 20 hours worth of prescribed medication in his body, antibiotics. So he was
looking a little
he
better.
was looking a little better, still feeling pretty crappy, but he was on the mend. You could definitely tell that he was on the mend and was looking forward to going to the other area and hopefully getting in the woods. So then we pushed westward probably about 3 hours, almost right on the Continental Divide. Still in the southern part of Colorado, but right on the Continental Divide. So we, the original plan was we were going to set up at a campground in our tents because we had some sick hunters. So
we were getting there.
we
right
figured
before
we'd be
dark.
close to the truck if people were too cold or whatever, if they needed to go to town or whatnot. You know, we had transportation access, immediate access to transportation. So lo and behold, we get to this campground we want to stay at, and it's closed for the season.
Oh Jesus!
So
you guys
Now-
are like 3 days into this trip, and it's just like
our,
every
our
day
whole
there's something
initial
being
plan of setting up base camp camps basically went to shit because of people were ill.
Yeah.
Right. And we'd never really established a contingency plan. Like, this was our plan.
Yeah.
Nobody really had given it a thought. Like, if we got sick, what are we going to do?
Right.
So then we were discussing at the parking lot of the closed campground, had a gate across it, right? Cattle gate. So we were thinking, well, maybe we can just stay along this river that was close to the road on a public, it's all public land.
land,
So
yeah.
we'll just pitch our tents here and call it a day. And about, I don't know, half a mile or a mile down the road of where we planned that we were going to pitch our tents, there was this little hamlet of
Yeah, a tiny village.
tiny little village. I wouldn't even call it a village.
Yeah. Right in this
well,
huge valley.
Chris
with
goes
towering
down.
mountains around it.
Chris goes down and kind of gets in touch with this point of contact, and there's cabins at this place.
I saw a sign. It was a rundown like mountain store, and it was a sign that said, whatever, Rocky Mountain Lodge, something like that. But it also said guided hunts. I thought it was a guided outfitters camp, but as we drove by, it says they got cabins available. So these guys are like, go check it out. Because at this point, it's real bad. At this point,
Yeah.
David is throwing up. Like, this kid is bad. It's getting ready to get dark. And I'm like, I can't see us
Jesus,
putting him
this
in a
is
tent
like
on the
this
side
is
of
a
the road.
nightmare.
It
So-
was. It was. So lo and behold, they have cabins, multiple cabins. I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking. This is
He must have had
the
5 cabins.
dead of the rut.
Prime time. for
Archery and muzzleloading. It's muzzleloading week. I mean, dead of the rut,
Never dreamed they'd have space
and
available.
they got multiple cabins available. We're like, what? And they're like, how many hunters do you have? We got 6 hunters. Like, how? So we need 6 beds. They got this place that slept like what, 9 or 10 people or something.
Yeah, we didn't even need that one. They
So-
had big ones, little ones.
we get this cabin, and we're like, okay, well, I guess we're staying here. So down to the cabin we go.
Oh my God.
You saw the troops' morale.
Oh yeah.
You talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
morale skyrocketing. As soon as we found that cabin, everybody was all
They got-
smiles and
they
it was
got-
so cheap. It was like $120 a night.
Oh my
And it
God.
had
Super cheap.
2
And
bathrooms, a shower,
and it-
huge kitchen,
That's fantastic.
It literally
screened in
was
front porch.
a 3 to 5 mile truck ride
To the trailhead.
to the trailhead of the hunting area that we were going to hunt. And we weren't going, I don't know, we were going, what, 2, 3? We wanted, our original plan was we were going to be hunting anywhere like between 2 to 4 miles back in.
Yeah.
So not an awful hike from the trailhead.
Yeah.
But then having the cabin, then we're all like, oh, we can download our packs. We can just take our day packs.
Right. You're not carrying.
We're not killing ourselves with 60 pounds on our back, 50, 60 pounds on our back. So
Game changer.
it was a game changer. We had a refrigerator.
So this was
we ended up-
Tuesday night.
this
was Tuesday night.
Okay.
So we still got 3 days worth of hunting.
Yeah.
Right. So we're all pumped up, and then it's 10, 11 o'clock, and we're like, man, we should probably get to bed. Now the beers are flowing, the whiskey's flowing.
That's the
It's like-
problem with being in a town is that you
Yeah.
have access to these sort of
Yeah.
things.
So
Well, there was nothing there.
we
There was nothing. The town offered nothing.
there was no
But
store,
we brought
no
our
nothing.
own beer and
Oh,
whiskey
you had
and-
cooler.
We had coolers and stuff in the truck, so
Yeah.
we had a good time that night. We were super excited. Obviously, Dave went to bed early. Sam was still a little bit under the weather, so he crashed a little early. But the rest of us stayed up kind of late, and we were going to a new area, so we weren't going in the dark. But then we decided that we probably should get to the trailhead at dark, so that's what we did.
Yeah, we were up early.
We were up early.
But you know what? Guess what? They had a coffee maker.
Yeah, we were hurt.
We were able to make coffee.
But we,
Nothing worse than a hangover at 9,000 feet
Oh,
elevation.
man. So
But in that valley, like in front of the cabin, the stars were out, and I was hearing elk bugling up in the mountains. I mean, it was exciting.
yeah,
We pile in those trucks, and it was a quick 20-minute drive.
yeah.
And that was really exciting
it
that
wasn't
day.
even-
But
wasn't
that
even
day,
that long.
that day, Sam and Jordan didn't go out because they were both
Yep.
sick.
So that
His
was
son wasn't
Wednesday
feeling-
morning.
Jordan's sick now.
That was
Yep.
Wednesday morning. So Tuesday, when we get to the cabin, Jordan starts like sneezing and sniffling and everything. So ultimately, he wasn't nearly as sick as Dave and what Sam was the first night. But he just didn't feel right. So, I just made a decision. Listen, don't get up early with us. Sam's gonna hang out. He's gonna fish. Excuse me. You get the combination fishing license. So Jordan's like, oh, I'd like to go fishing with Sam. So Jordan and Sam stayed back. They did some fishing. They actually caught a couple fish, and then they ultimately took a drive to one of the closest towns and made
New
a beer
Mexico.
run and
Nice.
They bought
and a
steaks.
food run. They ended up. We get back to the cabin from hunting Wednesday, and these guys got
Steaks.
frickin' what the hell? They have sirloin,
Everything.
and,
Strip
and
steaks.
They had round eye steaks.
Oh,
like
that's
we
fantastic.
ate like kings on Wednesday night.
It was,
So it was.
yeah, it was enough steaks for the second night.
So Wednesday, it was. Dave was with us Wednesday
was-
to hunt.
He was feeling better.
He was
From the
feeling
rest of the
better.
trip, he was good.
So it was myself, Joe, Chris, and Dave hunted. We went probably 3.5, 4 miles back in. It was.
We went 6 or 7.
Was it that far?
We went to that second
We went to the second
meadow,
meadow, yeah.
which
Yeah,
was
I
a way
guess you're
bigger
right.
hike than we thought. Remember,
Yeah.
it was a big hike.
I guess
We
it
did about
was probably
14 that day.
Yeah, it was about 6 miles back or so. I guess you're right.
We were like
we
kids.
saw some beautiful country.
We were honestly like kids in a candy store.
Yeah.
When we're walking through this valley on this trail, it's above this big creek, and we're about 50 yards above the creek, and you're walking. It's exactly what you picture Colorado. Like I was like, this is it.
Yes.
And
I was
you're
just
in
gonna
there
say that.
watching the sun come up. I mean, we were all smiling. We're taking pictures because you're just like, people don't understand. Yeah, we want to get elk. Obviously, that was the primary reason. But to be that privileged, to be out in the Rocky Mountains, watching the sun come up while you're hiking with friends and family, the sights were beautiful. I mean, the pictures don't do it justice.
No,
and you've
they
been
don't.
out there, you know.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like I keep telling, like my parents. I took my parents out there. We all went out for vacation this year. It's like until you see it, you
Yes.
just can't wrap your head around
I
it. It's
agree.
just the most.
The-
I haven't been everywhere by any means. It's like I have this map on my wall of where I've been, and I've been to like everywhere around Colorado. It's like I love Colorado, but the Rocky Mountains you just can't. To your point, like
No, you
everything you're
can't.
saying,
It's
you can't.
Like the grass is as green can be.
Right.
And we went, like I said, it was the middle towards the latter half of September, and it was wet all summer long. So the aspens hadn't changed. Like they were just starting to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it going last year and only hunting the one unit that we hunted the first couple of days that we just talked about, like that was not how I pictured Colorado elk hunting in the Rocky Mountains.
Where you were last year.
The high desert area
Right.
that we first went to, until we got, into the actual Rocky Mountains of the Continental Divide, and then we got to the trailhead the next morning, and saw in the daylight the tall ponderosa pines. I mean, it was anything and everything that you think about and see on television shows and movies of what you envision
Yeah.
elk country to be like. It did not disappoint, I can tell you that. Walking in, we were like, we could give two shits less if we saw or heard an elk.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful being where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hunted hard that day. Wednesday was
did a lot of calling. Pretty much.
we did a
Kind
lot
of
of
walking
calling.
and calling. Brian's a really good caller, so we called intermittently throughout. I mean, it was a 6-hour walk we had lunch there, so we got to our destination at noon, and you called progressively, trying to fire something up.
Yeah, every half a mile or quarter of a mile or so, we'd try to throw some bugles out.
Didn't
We were
really
in a
see
spot
anybody.
that had some lush meadows, some pretty decent sized meadows. I'd say a couple 100 acres
Yeah, beautiful.
of just meadows, and that's where we saw some free range cattle were in the meadows and stuff like that. But we didn't hear any bugling. so at lunchtime we had lunch, 6-7 miles back, like Chris said, and then ultimately knew we had, a
huge
bunch,
walk back.
bunch of hours walk back. So we did the same thing. We just kind of called our way back on this foot trail that kind of paralleled this one creek going in. And again, coming out, no bugling, no really
Nothing
decent
really.
sign of elk. But
We saw that. What was it? We saw a couple badgers, whatever they were. What was that thing that? Is that
Yeah.
badger? What do you call them?
Marmots,
Might be. It was like
what,
black,
what
like
is
the
it?
size
Say
of
it
a wood.
again.
marmot. There's a ton of marmots out
Yeah.
That had to be what it was. They're pretty
Yeah.
unique.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look like big woodchucks.
Yeah,
yes,
but they're real
that's
dark.
exactly what it was.
But they're like dark black.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if they're that. I don't.
Yeah, but they were darker.
Yeah.
It was a little different than a woodchuck.
So we kind of, as we were walking back, we kind of just were establishing a game plan of what we were going to do the next day and stuff like that. So we got back to the trailhead and headed back to the cabin
And linked up with those guys
linked
and
up
had
with
some
Sam and
steaks
Jordan. We had actually passed them. They were on a reservoir along the road, still fishing. So we linked up with them, and then went back to the cabin. That's when he had steaks and all that good stuff. So we,
He caught some fish too. Didn't he cook up some fish?
yeah, caught some rainbows, couple
nice.
rainbows. Yeah. So, yeah, we ate like kings on Wednesday night. Established a game plan for Thursday, and that's Thursday is when we split up.
Yeah. So
Chris, Dave, and Sam went basically on the same trail that the four of us had gone on Wednesday. And then Joe, Jordan, and myself went to the north side of this creek. So we were hunting the same exact drainage, just some of us were on the south side of the creek and some of us were on the north side of the creek. So Thursday was another great day. We went probably about, I'd say, 4 or 5 miles deep that day. And that's when you saw through the social media posts, we come across this lake. And we saw another hunter at the end of the lake. It's not very big. I would say maybe, 8-10 acres was the lake, not a huge lake. So we walked to the end where we saw this other hunter. Figured we'd pick his brain, see if he's seen anything or heard anything. When we got a little closer, there was a couple guys there. So most of the guys were in camouflage, but one guy was in blaze orange. And then we get talking, and I had never seen the show, but my son Jordan and Joe had seen the show Man Eater, right?
Meat eater.
Or Meat Eater.
Yeah, man eater's another program.
Man Eater's
yeah.
a different one, yeah. So, Meat Eater. And
Uncle Steve is not on man eater.
Joe and Jordan weren't saying anything, but the guy we were talking to looked familiar to them, as they had said later on. But we kind of chewed the fat there with a couple guys, and then we wished them good luck, and they wished us good luck and stuff like that. Well, where we were going, we had to kind of walk through their little area. They were taking naps and stuff. It was kind of, around 11:30, middle of the day. And we come over this little tiny knoll after we had walked away from these guys, and there's video camera equipment everywhere. And Joe stops and turns around. He's like, "Oh, you guys doing some videoing out here?" He's like, "Yeah, we're shooting some new footage for episode. You may have heard of our show. It's called Meat Eater." And he's like, Joe's like, "I knew it was you." So it was Giannis that we were talking to.
Janice
it was
Pudelis?
Janice that we were talking to. So
The Latvian eagle.
yeah.
it so we stayed and were trying to pick their guys' brains a little bit more. And then Joe asked if Steve was around, Steve Ranella, and he's like, "No, he's over taking a nap under some trees." And we hear this voice. He's like, "No, I'm awake. You can come on over. You guys grab a photo and stuff like that." So he throws his boots on, and then we got our pictures taken with Steve. But it was like,
That's pretty
what are
cool.
the chances?
No, when
5 miles back in the woods
that you
running
run into these
into
guys.
I knew where you guys were going on the second unit you were going to,
Right.
and I had been following along with Meat Eater throughout the fall, and they were talking about they were going on a muzzleloader elk hunt, and then they posted something when we had packed the elk out that one of our guys shot, and we stayed a night in a hotel, and I'm on Instagram and stuff looking, and
Sure.
and they're posting that they're in that area, and I'm like, that would be something else if they ran into them, and it's like
Crazy.
that's
What's the chances?
100,000 plus acre.
It's huge.
Oh,
It's
it's
bigger
huge.
than that.
Oh,
Like
it's
it's a
probably
bigger.
gigantic. It's
Maybe 500,000.
Yeah.
the San Juans,
yeah,
San
the
Juan
San
National
Juans
Forest.
what
Goes
the hell
forever.
was it? Like 173,000 or something?
I don't even know.
Yeah, it's
So,
huge.
but what the hell are the chances?
I know.
Obviously, fairly, 1 in a
And
million.
nothing like at the trailhead or nothing. Like nothing
deep.
gave it away. Like they didn't have any wrapped vehicles or anything.
Yeah.
It was. There was a few trucks in the trailhead. Not a ton of trucks.
No, not that many. Couple
small.
outfitters, they had horses. We didn't see many people out there hunting.
Did
which is-
did they have horses in there, or did they have
No.
anything? No,
No,
they were hiked in.
Yeah, they just hiked in. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty cool that you guys
It was-
had the chance to meet them.
It was super cool. It was super cool.
and that they were. It sounds like they were pretty laid back and.
They were super chill. Actually, Steve talked to us. I guess they had gotten on a bull earlier on in the day and bumped it. The wind was kind of goofy in that area that we were in. It was swirling quite a bit, changing. But he said it wasn't very big. It might not even have been legal. They said.
Yeah.
But it was bugling a little bit here and there.
Yeah, those guys are. I think that's like for all of us. Steve Ranella, I've been following him. Before he started his podcast, and I think
Yeah.
like it's been. You feel like you know these guys, but then you meet them, and you're like freaking nervous as shit. Like,
Yeah.
oh my god,
Yeah.
I'm meeting Steve Ranella. What's it
And-
gonna be like? And when Dad and I went to their live podcast in Columbus, like 3 years ago, and we waited in line to meet them after the show, and it was Mark Kenyon, Giannis, and Steve, and then Ryan Callahan was there as well. And Cal wasn't in line; he just was like hanging out over on the
Yeah,
side,
yeah.
drinking a beer and just hanging out.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe they just seemed like such good, genuine people, and just gave you all the time of day. It's like
Right.
they were standing. They did a show, and then they stood there for 2+ hours while there was a bar outside the comedy room that they did their show in. And I mean, they stood there, and it wasn't just like, oh, hi, here's a picture, give you an autograph, goodbye. It was like, where are you from? What type of hunting do you do? Like a genuine conversation. It's
Right.
like, man, these guys. I think that's such a good reflection of who. There's probably bad eggs out there in the hunting industry, but like that's such a reflection of just who hunters are. It's like I'm exhausted. I don't, I've been on my feet all day. But it's like you hunt just like I do, or you fish just like I do, or you like to hike just like I do.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to tell you stories.
Yeah.
And that's like
It was
so
cool
cool you
because
guys had that.
Giannis was super outgoing, super informative, and it was funny because my buddy Joe was like, I knew it was you, like in my brain I knew it was you, but I didn't know how to ask.
You don't want a
and not
fanboy.
make it weird,
right.
And Giannis is like, that's funny because I didn't really want to tell you who we were because it just sounds weird for me telling
Hi,
you.
I'm Giannis
Hey,
Patelis.
hi.
Yeah, right.
He was probably disappointed that you didn't recognize him right off the bat.
Or you could do like I was in Colorado, and I fanboyed out real bad. The only like time when I ran into somebody that was famous and I like freaked out was my brother-in-law and I, Donnie, were skiing at Keystone, and I'm like at the bottom of the mountain. There's hundreds and hundreds of people around, and we get to the bottom, and I look out in front of me, and it just like hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, that's Chipper Jones. And like growing up,
really?
Chipper Jones is like
Yeah.
I idolized him as I was a Braves fan,
Yeah,
played
yeah,
infield,
played for
like
the Braves, yeah.
freaking idolized Chipper Jones. And I popped my skis off and just charged like straight at him. And I mean, he's wearing you're skiing. He's wearing a helmet, goggles.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't pick him out of a
I don't know how you would know
combine.
him with a helmet and goggles.
I don't know. It just hit me, and I walked right straight to him, and it's like my instinct was Chipper, how are? I put my hand out, like handshake. Chipper, how are you? And he's like, holy shit, how did you make me out? You know? And I could just see on his face, he's like, oh my god, not like who's this guy? What's he gonna? And then he was with Matt Duff, and him and Matt Duff they're the Major League Bow Hunter.
The Major League Bow Hunter guys.
Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
like as soon as and I looked at it and I go, Duffer, what's up? Like it's just like I knew these. I didn't know. Like whatever. But then we started talking hunting, and then Chipper was like totally cool. Like if I would have gone up to him and been like, Chipper Jones, oh my god, that time you did that in the World Series, he would have probably been like, oh, another one of these guys. But it's so funny. Like you bring hunting into it. It's like such a shared passion with everybody that it's like Chipper, you were incredible. You're a Hall of Famer, first ballot guy. But it's like I just want to know like how'd your hunting season go? And I say to him because this was over Thanksgiving break, or Thanksgiving, and I was missing opening day of gun season back here, and I'm like, Chipper, how the hell did your wife get you to miss the rut too? You know, like we're just joking, but it's funny. Like hunting just brings everybody together, and totally just derailed your story about Uncle Steve, but.
No, that's fine.
I mean, that's a dream come true.
It is. They'll never happen again. That will not happen
I
again.
felt bad because I didn't follow his show. Like obviously, I knew who he was. I've heard of the show Meat Eater, and listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, I knew that Steve was the one that got Joe Rogan into bow hunting, right? So, but I didn't follow the show, not enough to where I could pick the guy out and be like, and all of his cast members, I had no idea. Right. And then it wasn't until we saw the video equipment and Joe asked a question. He's like, I knew it was you guys, you know. So that was super cool. We talked with those guys for, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes more. And they were going a different way. They asked kind of a generalized area where we were going to be hunting because they didn't want to bump into us, which was super awesome. I mean, even though they're famous hunters on television, like you see, they still have hunting ethics, right?
Right.
So that was really heartwarming that they asked us where we were going to be hunting generalized area and vice versa. So we didn't hear any bugling, which we were still on cloud nine and didn't really care because we had just met famous television cast of hunters. So when we came back out to the trailhead, these guys were not out yet. So Dave, Chris, and Sam were not out yet. Chris's truck was still parked there, so we wrote them a little note. There was probably still, I don't know, maybe an hour left of daylight or so, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So we just had decided, we're just going to head back to the lodge and link up back there with those guys. And so we go back to the lodge, and I'm trying to think, we were doing something, and then I think we were going back. There was like this little gift shop just before the start of this little village that we had mentioned, and we were going to go back there and see if they had more beer and snacks and food and stuff like that. And in doing so, these guys were driving down the dirt road. So, we're like, should we tell them? Should we send them a text message? We're like, no, we're not going to tell. We'll surprise them when they get back to the lodge, right? Well,
and we had stuff we wanted to surprise them with. We're like, they're never going to believe it.
Yeah, so we see them on the road.
We both have big
and we
days.
stop, and we could tell they had something to share, and they could tell we had something to share. So we let the cat out of the bag, and we pull our phones out, and we show them the picture that we met Steve Rinella, took pictures with him and everything. They're like, no way.
I was not expecting
There's
that.
no freaking way. And then, of course, Chris is all amped up because they got into
elk.
Couple herds of elk, and they were super pumped up. So I'll let Chris go and tell his side, the southern side of the creek that we were hunting.
So it's Thursday, and we head out, and it was Sam and David and I, and we head back down the same trail as Wednesday. Our plan was to go 3 miles in, and there was a big meadow, and with a ridge line on the other side, north-facing slopes. Our plan was to go back in and hunt that meadow and that whole adjacent area. And it will only take like an hour and a half to get in there. So we got in there at first light, and to our surprise, we see a tent down in the meadow. there's a little trout stream that runs through it. But there was a tent down there, and I see hunters. So we stop. I'm like, well, that completely blows our plan, because I was going to go across there and hunt. So we're sitting there. We take a break, grab a drink of water, and we're looking down at the tent. And then I see hunters popping out of the woods down there on either side. I'm like, geez, there's got to be like 4 hunters down there. And we did see a group walking in the day before as we were walking out, like 3 people from Texas. So I'm like, must be those guys. So now I'm like, I really don't know what to do. I guess we'll just go deeper. Let's go deeper again. Really did not have a solid game plan. That really threw me off. So I wanted to hunt those north-facing slopes. So we continue on, and I'm really not that good at bugling. Even though I had all this time to prepare, I never perfected bugling.
I don't know if you ever perfect it.
Yeah, I mean, Brian's really good at it, and his son's good at it. But so I'm like, well, I don't have this calling asset of like, I could do some bugles, but they weren't beautiful. But I did know how to cow call. I could cow call really good. Like I had that down really good.
Yeah.
So as we walked, every quarter mile, I would throw out cow calls. Well, we got about probably 3/4 of a mile past these hunters in the big meadow. We're up in the woods. We got the creek below us. And we stopped to take a break, and there's a big rock above us. We couldn't see the creek at this point. And we're standing there, and we thought we heard a bugle. And I thought it was those guys. I'm like, there's hunters all over the place back there. We heard that bugle. I'm like, that sounds like it's across the creek. So, it's like this big rock that's covered, like trees have grown on the rock. It's been there a while. So Sam stays below. We drop our packs, and me and David hike up, 20 yards up top this rock. And we're standing on top of the rock, and all of a sudden I hear a bugle, not across the stream, on our side of the stream, on the side of the mountain behind us. And now I'm like, and it was a horrible bugle. Like, it did not sound good. It was kind of a crappy bugle. Crappy enough where I'm like, I looked at David. I'm like, is that for real? And I threw out a couple of cow calls, and it like bugled again. And I'm like, geez, that's right up above us. That's got to be 150 yards away. So now we're excited. I'm like, I don't think that's a hunter. So I sneak back down the hill. I get to Sam, and I thought maybe it was Sam goofing around. I asked Sam. He's just walking around. I'm like, did you bugle? He goes, no. He never heard the bugles. So we all got excited. I go, well, there's something up there. So we got our packs. We walked back down the trail the way we had just come, and there was a big draw that went up the mountain. I mean, you could see it. There was like a sheer cliff, like rocks, and then there was an open draw, and then there was woods. So we went into the woods. We start walking into the woods. I think we might have heard one more bugle, like up on that mountain. So now we're all excited. So we start walking along, and we only went about 50 yards, and we came across a trail, a game trail. This game trail was muddy. It had been and you couldn't see it from the main trail, and there was no human prints in it. And we're all like, holy cow, we just came across like a highway. And it's going right up this nice, gentle, easy draw, going up the mountain. So we're just stealthy, just taking our time. And now we're coming across fresh elk tracks. So now we're really pumped up. So we sneak up there. We actually came up to one of the, what do you call them, mudden holes?
Oh, a wallow.
Like a wallow?
Yeah.
And we're like, holy cow. So we get up there, and we're just about at 10,000 feet. I mean, it really only took us maybe 25 minutes. It was not far to get up this mountain, going this way. And we get up top the mountain, and it opens up. It's a big meadow. And on the side of the meadow is a ridge line of like pine trees and stuff. That's, this little ridge line is probably, 400 or 500 yards long and maybe like, 80 yards tall. But it's a predominant feature on the side of this meadow. So we get up there, and we're standing there in the meadow, careful looking for elk. We don't see any elk in the meadow. And there's a couple pine trees we're standing next to. And I throw out a couple calls and nothing. We don't hear anything. So while we're standing there, David's like, he goes, did you hear that? I go, what? He goes, I heard something up in the woods above us on this ridge line. I'm like, I didn't hear it. He goes, oh, I heard something like walking, or I heard a rock. I'm like, no, I didn't hear that. So I said, I tell you what, the wind was kind of blowing a certain direction. I said, we all agreed, why don't we circle around this meadow? We'll sneak our way around the meadow and get the wind in our favor, because the wind was starting to shift on top of the mountain. And we had a feeling they were like on this ridge line. So I bet you we only walked 50 yards. We had left that spot, and we're in these trees. Right back where we had just left, we hear a bugle, and it's close. I mean, it's so close that I'm like an elk had just come out of the woods where we just were. And there was only a few trees. We couldn't see that spot because it dropped off, but we all like dropped. We got against trees. I got an arrow in. We're like, I'm throwing out some real soft cow calls. Nothing. We sat there for a long time, because now we're like, shit, there's something right there. Well, now it's about 11 o'clock, and no more bugling. Everything was quiet. We sneak back over, don't see anything. And we're like, elk usually bed down in the afternoon. Everybody says they bed, and then by 2 o'clock they'll be up and moving, or 3 o'clock. So we're like, why don't we go back down the mountain? We'll grab lunch, and then we'll sneak back up here and hopefully catch the herd when it gets up. So that's what we did. We went down, grabbed lunch, come back up. At about 3 o'clock, we're set up in the same spot. We all had trees, and like these small pine trees were sitting underneath. And I start throwing out calls and not getting anything back. So we said, we decided the original plan. We said, why don't we sneak around this meadow, which is about 300 yards. Let's go around the meadow, and we'll get on the back side of this ridge line, and let's hunt up that ridge line. So we sneak around the meadow, and now it's probably about 4 in the afternoon, 4:30. And we get around the meadow, and it was a very distinct ridge line. I mean, it was probably only 70 yards wide at that point. And sure enough, here's another game trail shooting right up it. So now we're super stealth mode. I mean, we're not breaking branches. Each one of us is 1 foot at a time. I'm like, I feel like we're moving in. Like, there's a herd up here. And I looked on my Onyx map, and I saw on top of the mountain that it was a sheer drop-off on the other side. So I know they couldn't escape us. They would have to go back down to the trail or whatever. So we get up top this little ridge, and we're sneaking along. And I might have threw out a couple calls. And then one answers. It seemed like it was right in front of me. I was amazed I couldn't see these animals.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm like, this sucker sounds close, like within 100 yards. Enough once again where, like, we're taking knee. I got an arrow in. I throw out a couple soft cow calls. It bugles back. And then off to my left, down the ridge line, to my left, to the north of me, I hear another bugle. Now there's 2 of them. And now I'm like, honestly, I don't know what to do. Like, this is new territory. I've never elk hunted. I've listened to a bunch of podcasts, and I don't know how to bugle that good. But they seem to like the cow calling. So I'm just keeping it simple. I'm like, they're responding. So I'm kind of thinking like turkey hunting. I'm like, well, I'll pretend I'm a cow, and I'm going to call a bull in. Well, looking back, I was talking must be to the satellite bulls that were on the outskirt of the herd. And they were bugling back and forth. But then I could hear them drift down the mountainside, like they wouldn't seem to come in. So we'd move a little bit closer. Same thing happens again. They bugle, but now they're down the north side of the slope a little bit. And I really didn't know what to do. I'm like, I felt like I was going to get busted if I walked too far. And then the wind started shifting a little bit. But then the best part of the whole hunt is all of a sudden we heard a bugle like I've never heard before. It was like a baritone, like a tuba. It had to be the herd bull. And he let out, I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. He was like just a ferocious, deep, not even like the bugles that we'd try to do. It was like nothing I've heard before. And he was like the boss. And all of us just like, holy shit, we're all smiling. And he was probably trying to call me in. I listened to some podcasts, and Brian brought up a great point. There was the one guy who did the elk podcast.
Yeah.
He's the elk pro about talking to elk.
The elk nut. What's his
The elk
name?
nut, yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name.
But
We had talked about it after you told me the story.
listening later, Brian's like, you should have walked right into him. Because
Yeah.
I listened to the podcast later, and the guy's like, when you get in that situation,
Yeah.
when that herd bull calls, and he wants to bring that cow in, he goes, you can walk literally right up to him and just shoot him.
He'll stay right there.
They'll
That's
stay
what they
right
say
there.
Anyway.
He goes, I've done it before. But, I didn't know that. I was too nervous. You're afraid of
Yeah,
spooking the animals.
Right. It's
So-
amazing, like in hindsight, what you think, but when you're in that moment, it's like you're paralyzed.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I don't
Like,
wanna
I
do anything
can't,
wrong.
Yeah.
it's funny because we drove to Colorado to elk hunt, And the first bugle I heard, I go, there must be another hunter. And David's like, Dad, we're out here to elk hunt. It's probably an elk. And I just couldn't get it through my brain that we had stumbled across elk.
Right.
Not because we're great hunters. We're just out there trying to make it happen. So the situation developed where I felt like they were moving down this ridge line. We still couldn't see them. The satellite bulls had dropped off the bugling, and we didn't hear the herd bull again. And I looked at the map. I said, they're going to be on this mountain tomorrow morning because we're getting close to dark now. And I said, these guys are going to stay up here. We're at 10,000 feet. They can't go down the other side. So my plan is, I go, why don't we hike out? We haven't spooked them. And we'll bring Brian and Joe back in the morning. And Brian has very good, calling skills. Because we were going to leave Friday by lunchtime.
Yeah.
So that's where the story ends. We hiked out. We were very excited. And we actually saw an elk hiking out. We were about a mile from the parking area. And I looked across the creek like 300 yards away, and we saw an elk just standing on, way on the other side. So we did get to see one. And that was actually really close to the parking area.
Yeah.
But our plan was the next day is to bring these guys in and see if we could close the deal. And the herd was there.
They were there.
They were there. So I'll fast forward a little bit. We went back all excited. We had drinks. Everybody was very happy. And we all agreed that I think we had to pay one more day for the cabin because we were out hunting all day. These guys never asked for ID. They just gave us the cabin. They're like, just stop back when you can and pay. So
That's wild.
We didn't pay a single dime until, we could never link up. We were the
little
office,
store closed at 4 o'clock.
The office with the cashier closed at a certain time, so we were never at the cabin to pay the cashier. So when we got up Friday, we still hadn't paid for the cabin yet.
So we agreed that one of us would come back.
So we
Hey, Billy, you can grab a couple beers while you're up there?
Sure can.
so we
So we basically packed up everything that morning in the dark.
Yep, we packed up everything, and then we drove to the trailhead. And when we got to the trailhead, that's when you had forgotten something, right?
I had forgotten my cell phone.
Your cell phone, that's right.
I
Because
left it on the charger in the kitchen.
only the 5 of us went in.
I had to, I was like, you guys, I'm out. I'm like,
Yeah,
because I didn't want you guys to wait
that's right too. Yeah.
40 minutes. So
Yeah,
at this part of the story, I knew I was out of the hunt.
right.
So I just accepted the fact it was all about the group at that point.
Yep.
So I drove back to the cabin, got my cell phone, came back, and I basically, hiked in by myself to catch up with these guys. And
Yep, and that's when.
Why don't you pick it up where you guys hiking in without me?
Yep. So we went in the trailhead. We were hiking into the trail, and I don't know. We got about 3/4 of the into where you had mentioned where you got into the herd the day before, and we're ducks in a row on this trail. I was in the lead, and up jumps an elk between the trail and the creek, and it comes up the hill. I don't know, probably a 40-foot embankment or so, 40-foot.
Yeah, you said it ran straight up that hill, right?
And it ran 50 yards in front of us across the trail, and it stops up on the side of the mountain, probably, I don't know, 75, 80 yards from us.
Yeah.
And of course, we got our bows, so I'm trying to knock an arrow, get the rangefinder out, and it's in the wide open, 75, 80 yards from us. And just as I get the rangefinder out and I pull it up to my eye to range it, the elk takes off the rest of the way up the hill.
How big was he? How big was his rack? His antlers?
It looked like it was a 5x5. It was a decent sized bow. It was definitely it was a legal
Shooter.
bow.
Yeah, you could shoot it.
It has to be 4 points on one side. It was definitely a shooter bow. So, so that was super cool. It got us even more pumped up than we already were.
And this is on their walk in.
Wow.
So
I had to go back to get my cell phone. I was not with him on this portion. I'd walk in by myself, like an hour behind him.
we finally get to the little ridge line, the draw that Chris is talking about that has the game trail on it that was just piss pounded with elk tracks. And we get up there. We went about halfway up, and we were doing some bugling. I was doing some bugling, some elk calls, and we thought we heard a bugle off on top of the ridge where Chris had heard him the day before. So we went up a little further, up to where the wallow was, and that's where we dropped our packs. We decided we're going to drop our packs. If we happen to go up the ridge a little farther and we shoot something up there, we got a short hike back to our packs if we got to pack something out. So we wanted to bring some stealth into the game. So we dropped our packs, and I don't know, we walked probably another 100, 150 yards around the edge of the meadow that Chris was talking about, and I let out a couple bugles, and a freaking bull cracks off.
No kidding.
And we could hear some cows talking a little bit, just like very faintly. So we look up as high as we could see on the skyline, and we see the herd. And this bull he's coming down. And he only came probably maybe 20, 30 yards off of the skyline. And I mean,
is this above tree line there, or is it?
This is like in tree line.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
the ridge I was telling you about. It was fully wooded ridge on top of the mountain.
So there was like a pretty thin aspen grove between the corner of the meadow that we were in and the top of this ridge line. So the elk could see pretty decent through this aspen grove. I don't know if the bull saw us or the wind shifted, because the wind was
all over.
The wind was all over the place up on the side of this ridge line. But ultimately, lo and behold, we bumped the herd. They went farther up onto the mountain and further into this the ridge line, and we went after them. I mean, we super inexperienced. We didn't really know what the hell we couldn't go around the backside because we would have been cliffed out.
Right.
So.
You said it was the last day too, so
it was the last day. We
just give it
we
everything
pretty
you
much said, if we don't have something on the ground by noontime, 1 o'clock, then we're pretty much just walking out by then. So we went after him. The bull continued to bugle, but it was just it was further and further and further away. And then obviously we never caught up to the herd. We never could get around them.
We heard them bugling. Even when I caught up with you guys, remember walking down that
Yeah, they
drop?
were still bugling. They were
We
talking.
heard them off to our left.
They were talking good.
Yeah.
They were talking good by the end
if
of the
you're not
hunt.
going to shoot one, you at least get to hear them.
Yeah.
And you get
So,
to see them.
It was exciting.
We when the bull first started coming down the hill, though, we were all super excited. We had 2 or 3 guys that had arrows knocked, and it was.
It was going to be like
we
a
thought
pincushion.
we thought it was game on, but we could just never close the deal.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, for us
was
to go out there, when you think about it, it's an area we've never been to before. All of it was online scouting. But to go out there and the first day was uneventful. But the second day, to get into elk, I mean, I thought it was really cool for an area we've never hunted before.
Yeah.
And then, as hunters, to make a smart game plan and come back, and they were just like we thought. I'm like, well, they're going to stay on top of that mountain. And Brian got up there and got into them again. I mean, that's a lot better than than driving 20 hours back saying, well, we never saw anything, never heard anything.
Never heard or saw anything, and
it was pretty exciting.
We talked about this. Joe and Sam and I talked about this in the truck. We actually chose an area where a professional hunter and his camera crew chose as well. Like, those guys they don't do what they do on television because they're shitty hunters.
Well, I don't know I'm sure that
we
area
must
was
have
chosen
done
because Giannis, you don't follow him that closely, but Giannis, his career prior to working with Meat Eater he was a guide and did a ton of guiding in Colorado.
Oh,
so
I
he
didn't
knows
realize
Colorado very, very well.
Okay.
So for them to be in that drainage, to pick that area, but I found it interesting and it was funny knowing that you guys had seen them, listening to their podcast talking about their Colorado muzzleloader hunt.
Yeah.
They spoke to how much pressure they ran into. There was whether you know, and it was funny knowing that you guys are part of that
Part of the pressure.
Right.
Well,
But there was just so many people in that area.
But they were up higher. They were on the north side of that valley, up higher. Down in the valley, like, we didn't have a lot of pressure. Besides, I mean, I saw the guys in the tents. But
was there hiking trails into there, or
Yeah.
was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not see a lot of people.
No.
It was, you know, I think where they were might have been a little more pressured.
Yeah, and the outfitters, like the livestock trailers that were at the trailhead,
They must have gone real deep.
they were super deep, and that's kind of brings me to what I wanted to talk about was in this little hamlet where we stayed, like everyone we came across was not hesitant whatsoever about giving information.
Yeah,
Like
right.
if you asked, like they would say, "Oh yeah, you know this outfitter over here, these guys have killed like 8 or 9 bulls in the last couple weeks or whatever, you know, with different."
They told us they're all above 9,000 feet, right? You
Yeah,
said.
and it, like they were not hesitant to feed information
Isn't
to
that
people
crazy?
at all.
Yeah.
I was like, I was flabbergasted because you know the deal. I mean, here in New York, it's more of a private land.
Yeah, it's like a territorial thing. You don't
It is
want
a
everybody to know
territorial
what's
thing.
going
Like
on.
everybody's spot is a secret spot. Even if you're hunting on public land, it's like everybody thinks it's your private spot, right?
Right.
So I was super impressed with not being hesitant of providing information. Like just down home country living folks that were just like,
they-
hey, thanks for coming out, and
And
it
if
was
you want
almost
to
like
reflect on those people, the folks that live out there that make their living off that,
That's
they
what I was just gonna
need
say.
you coming back.
That's what I was just gonna
to
say.
Stay in their
They-
cabins,
they
to buy your license. to do that.
appreciate
Right.
out of staters coming and you know
Spending your hard-earned money.
spending your money in their community.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Because if that little community, it's there for one reason. That community does not have industry. It does not have,
No, there's
you know, they need the outdoor lifestyle to support
Yeah.
their sustainability
And
to
it-
live there.
the gift shop I had previously mentioned. We did end up Friday. We ended up going to that gift shop. I picked up something for my wife and something for my other kids.
Yeah.
And the lady, the co-owner, the husband and wife there, they did say they stay in this little hamlet area till what they say September 30th, right?
yeah.
And basically
the whole
after
valley
that,
shuts down.
basically the whole valley shuts down. And I couldn't believe that they shut down basically at the end of archery season. They beat feet. They're from Texas,
Oh, okay.
and they own this little shop during the summer and the first couple months of fall.
Yeah.
But they said at a moment's notice you could have 6 to 8 feet of snow, and roads are impassable.
You're done.
They
So
said
they're-
there's one guy who stays in the valley, one old timer who stays the entire winter in that valley.
Yeah.
There can't be
Yeah.
more than
I mean, we're-
150 people that live in this valley.
So I can't remember what day it was. Maybe it was Thursday when you guys. Maybe that's when it was, because we ended up going to the little town in New Mexico too that Sam and Jordan went to.
You did. You drove
That
down
was
there to get
Thursday,
to
right?
get chips
Before
and
we
dip
had
and
met
stuff.
you guys.
Yeah.
But this town was, I don't know, it was like 15, 20 miles away. And from the time we left this little hamlet, driving westward, southwest, we were to the Continental Divide in like 10 minutes. Like literally, we were going straight up mountains, and we
Like,
were there. So we were.
So is there a pass or something? That's
Yeah,
kind
there
of
was a
the-
pass. I mean, you know, the
get
name
down
of the
into New
pass.
Mexico.
The name of the pass.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I can't remember what it is, but it.
That's how close we were to. It was very
that
close.
was. Yeah, we were damn close to 13,500, 14,000 feet. Was just when those guys Wednesday when Jordan and Sam went trout fishing. The first day we were in the new area, they went to this one reservoir. It was like at 11,600 feet or whatever, where they went fishing. The first spot that they went.
Yeah.
So and it was.
Oh, so they weren't fishing streams. They were fishing like high
they
country lakes.
they ended
or-
up fishing both.
Okay.
But this one place that they had looked on the map, they're like, oh, this looks like a pretty. And the reason they went there was they tried to get to a certain elevation to where they could have communications with us in the area we were. So that's kind of why they chose that area. We never could communicate with one another via cell phone, but that's why they chose that area to begin with. But eventually they did fish some streams and different rivers and stuff like that throughout the day. But
Yeah, the whole time you were there was no cell service. The entire time.
Yeah.
As soon as you drove down in this valley,
yeah,
there was out hunting, back
There's
at
none.
camp, there was no cell service.
Yeah.
You would have had to drive to New Mexico or drive back out the other way to
once you got up to the higher elevations, like
Alamosa, whatever that
11,000
town
or
was.
11,500,
Yeah.
that's when you started getting back in the cell range on the main roads and stuff.
Right. So we just did a pretty damn good job in an hour and 20 minutes recapping your adventurous 5-day hunt out there, which is amazing how much adversity you went through. So I guess there's a few things I want to kind of fly through here. When you go too fast, but it seems like, so I've been out west twice. Both times there was unexpected things that happened that kind of threw the trip into a little bit of a, like you have in your mind what you're anticipating. You have a plan.
Sure.
And what I've learned is on these trips, there's going to be curveballs that are going to get thrown at you.
Yes.
So I guess my question for you guys is, and especially Chris, this is your first trip going out there.
Yeah.
Like, what was that like for you, where you ramp up for a year plus, you're thinking about this and all these expectations, and like right off the bat, you guys ran into adversity. Like the trip got spun sideways in a hurry.
Yeah, that was not what I planned on. My plan was everybody's gonna be 100% healthy.
Yeah.
We can sleep in tents and we'll be fine. I didn't anticipate, that we would have to search for shelter at the second area in particular. And here's one thing I didn't mention. The second area, when we got to the Rio Grande National Forest, San Juan, it's all kind of the same there. Driving in that valley, I can't tell you how intimidating it was. The mountains that went up in this valley, I was like, I don't even think you can walk up them. They were so steep.
Yeah.
Remember that? I mean, driving in there, I'm like,
Yeah.
I knew there was one trail down by the little hamlet we stayed in, and there was a zigzag. It would take you forever to go up this mountain to get back in the valley that we hunted. But I remember being very intimidated by the terrain. I was like, man, this is a lot steeper. This is a little different than what I thought. It's not like just walk out in the woods.
Yeah.
The next morning when we found the other parking area, then the guy who worked at the camp who rented us the lodge, he pulled out a map and he goes, I think you should go over here and park and walk right along this creek, and this will take you in. And that was great advice, because all the exploring we did, I never really explored off Onyx. I never explored that one option. I don't know why I didn't catch that. We had all sorts of ideas how to get in there.
Right.
But he laid it out for us, and that worked out great.
Man,
But
I mean,
Yeah,
you're stating that, and that the intimidation factor, 100%. Like, and that was your first time into big mountains. I mean, you guys went to that area where you hunted, where you got your cow. But I mean, did you feel the same thing?
I really did. The first year we went to that area, and the highest we went was like 9,300 feet. And we weren't at that elevation for very long. We had very little adversity that trip.
Yeah.
Joe and my son
It was
and
a
I.
quick
So
trip.
it was a quick trip. We only hunted for 3 days, and we got it done on the first day. So we were on cloud 9 and kind of just effed off for a day and a half. The second and a half of the third day. But if anybody's listening to this and using this as a knowledge base to gain knowledge of what they want to experience, the one thing I will take away from this past fall's trip is to have more than one plan. Have a solid game plan A, but also establish a plan B for different reasons, health-related reasons, or
Right.
Whatever. Definitely go with. We knew the area where we wanted to hunt, and we had a solid e-scouting plan of what we wanted to do when we were in the woods. But you don't really think of those things of if somebody gets sick, or you
How
have
far
a
is the
vehicle
nearest
breakdown,
hospital,
or
right.
how far is the nearest hospital, or what if one person gets sick? Are the rest of you going to go and hunt? Like, those are things that you have to
And you
discuss
almost
as
need
a
to,
hunting group.
you need to discuss that because
And-
that can
You do.
that can create some serious issues between people. Like I know with us this year, we never thought in a million years
Yeah,
that
you
we'd
went
be
to the
going to
hospital.
the emergency room with Danny.
Right.
And granted, that was when we were we called it a hunt and we started leaving, but it's like never in a million years did we think that, and then it created animosity between the guys because you inherently become selfish because everybody puts all this into it, and it's not just your hunt, it's everybody else's hunt too.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird dynamic when you do these big trips because everybody wants to experience it in their mind,
In
what
their
they
way.
want to experience.
Yeah, and it was challenging right off the get-go for us only because, with Sammy living in Virginia, it wasn't, we never had a time where all of us got together to pick each other's brain.
Yeah.
I mean, for sitting back and listening to your guys' story and knowing, like, when you guys were laying out, like, this is where we're going, this is the travel plan, I'm like, that sounds like a freaking nightmare. Yeah. I'm like, you got people coming from all these different places and all this, and then I didn't, we talked about your hunt, but I had no idea about the illnesses that affected, like, immediately when you got there.
Yeah.
Like, that's, and I think to your point, Brian, not to talk too long on this point, I want to move on to some other stuff, but you have, like, you gotta be flexible, and when you have your expectations going on these trips, plan for that. And I think we've all considered on this couch and say, look, you're gonna have in your mind what this trip's gonna be. You have to come to peace with the fact that it's very likely gonna not be that, and you have to be able to adjust and be flexible. And from my personal experience, I struggle with that bad. Like, I get set in my mind what my trip's gonna be, and if my trip's not that, I get moody. Like, I need a Snickers.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll just cover it because I know we want to cover some other things, but for those that are listening, if you're going to go in a large group, I would say bigger than 2 people, 3, 4, or even more people than that. Have somebody like in charge or establish the logistical things of where you're going to meet up, what route you're going to take out there. And I was fortunate enough. I kind of was the go-to person for this trip as far as doing the planning and everything. And I was fortunate to have these guys were super flexible. Like, they kind of just told me, we're in it for the adventure.
Right.
What we get is what we get. What we see is what we see.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy, but not every hunting group is going to be like that.
Right.
So
And
if you have people in your hunting group, like you called yourself out, and you have people like yourself,
'Cause I'm the one that-
you have to have those sit-down meetings and hash out what everybody wants to get out of the trip.
See, in our hunting group of 5 guys, we have 3 of us that are pretty damn opinionated, and then 2 of them that are
That's
just
tough.
like, hey, man, we'll go and do whatever.
Yeah, that's tough.
Danny and Tard are just like, yeah, you tell me what direction we're going, and I'm going.
Yeah.
And then Bob and Brian and I, the 3 of us are all very opinionated. We have our own ideas, and then you put on top of it, this isn't just going on a whitetail hunt where you're going to go walk and sit in your own tree stand for 8-10 hours and then come back to camp at night. You're relying physically on other people and for everybody to be able to be at your level. So, like, for me, and this is just me being honest, I was, I just want to, like, go. I just want to hammer down. And then you got a couple other people in the group that want to hammer down. And that trip, our trip this year, Danny and Brian got broke down bad when we had the hike in was not good. Like, we drove 24 hours straight, and those brutal. 2 guys, they'll admit it. They were hiking up the trail, and I ended up carrying some of Brian's gear. Brian ended up dropping his bag, and I hiked up the rest of the way to camp, came back down, which it wasn't that far from that point. So I'm not like hero talk here. Yeah. But it's like that. We started off on the wrong foot on that trip. We got out there, and that hike in whooped our asses. I had done it myself personally. When I was out there, I walked that trail by myself with no weight on my back.
Right.
But then, after riding in a car, though, it's totally different. When you sit in a car for 24 hours.
Yeah. So it's just...
That's tough.
It's hard. Like, I think that's one of the hardest parts about going on these trips, and anybody who's going to plan on putting one together is that everybody's got to understand the physical demand of it. Now, you don't have your trip does not have to be that. You guys could do what you did and find a little place with a cabin, and maybe that's the best route for your first trip to go on a Western experience.
Yeah.
Is don't try to go 7 miles back in with 7 days worth of gear on your back. You know,
I'll tell you what, I've done both. I've done a backpack trip, and I wasn't far back in, maybe 2-3 miles.
Yeah.
And I've done a trip where ultimately this past year we wound up in a lodge, and
had a great time in the lodge.
I love my backpacking trip, but I'll take hunting out of a lodge.
Absolutely.
But I mean, you could cover a lot of ground. You can cover a lot of ground with a headlamp on in the dark on a trail until you get to where you want to hunt in daylight, and then disperse and do your thing from there.
Yep.
And I'm not at all wanting to take away from a backpack, backwoods backpacking trip, but
It's not as easy as people think. It's a lot
I'll
tougher.
tell you, the next time I go out west, I'll be staying in a lodge, and I spent a lot of money on some high quality gear to stay back in the woods that I didn't use this year. Thank God my wife doesn't know too much about that.
Hopefully she doesn't listen to this. Yeah, and that's I mean, you have to. Elk hunting is a different beast. When you're
totally
trying
different.
to kill a mule deer, different story.
Different.
Elk, and that's what and I've talked about this on the podcast since. Shooting an elk is a completely different ballgame, and you cannot. I can tell you this. I can listen to 150 hours of podcasts of people telling me that, and it's like, oh no, we can handle it. We got a bunch of tough guys. Bullshit. You go up there and you start carrying out and you've done it. You did it with your cow. You take a bull that we each had,
Probably damn near
80
twice
pounds
the size. Yeah.
plus on our backs. Probably 80
exhausting.
pounds.
Yeah.
know. A couple of the loads were bigger than the others. I mean, Tard carried out. He had a full quarter and maybe some back straps or whatever, and the horns. I mean, he was just loaded down, but he doesn't. He's a freaking bull. He will not say boo. He just he puts his headphones in and just goes.
Yeah.
But the rest of us, we were all feeling it bad. Like it broke people down.
Yeah.
So me saying that, and I know Chris, you're talking about your next. You and Uncle Tim are talking about your next hunt.
Doing a guided hunt. Yeah.
And I'm in the same boat. Like I've said to the guys, like, look, at my next elk hunt, I want to shoot an elk really bad, but I think my next elk hunt's going to be an outfitted hunt because I want to have that experience, but I don't want that stress of.
Right.
I want to be put in front of elk and know what to do.
Use
You
somebody
can go-
else's skills to find them,
Right.
and then
Yeah.
use your woodsman skills
Exactly. After
to
that.
close the deal.
For someone like
Sure.
ourselves, that we may only get a chance to go maybe 10 times in our lives. That's not it's not the same as my experience in these 2 trips, mule deer hunting on both trips, is that you can get on mule deer and you can take some of the stuff that you do as a whitetail hunter here and analyze some of their movements and try to anticipate what they're going to do and put yourself in a position just like you would in a tree stand here. Get ready for that. And we had a lot of opportunity on this hunt this year for deer. But with elk, it's like, I don't even know what to do. Like I've listened to hours, I've watched videos, but it's like, until you are in that situation, it's like, do I bugle? Do I cow call?
Yeah.
You just need experience.
You do.
So
You
I think
do.
that's where I'm at. And I think you're in the same spot with, looking at an outfitted hunt coming up. Maybe.
And I'm actually, I had so much fun and I have some more confidence. I'm receptive to going out again, doing the same type of hunt. But Tim really wants to go out, and Tim is dead set on doing a guided hunt first, and then he thinks he'll have better odds with a do-it-yourself. And I don't disagree with that. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, you know what? I don't like spending a lot of money on these hunts like for a guided, but I'll do it once. And this place that we picked out up by, I think it's by Somerset, Colorado, by Gunnison, their first week of archery is 90% success rate, and then it goes
90%
80.
sex rate?
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds exciting. How much does
That sounds like a good trip too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and they get out too.
That's funny.
So
90% success rate.
success rate,
Yeah.
and then the second week is 80%, and I'm like, that's incredible. So I've never done a guided hunt with Tim. There's a lot to this trip. This is different. I'd like to enjoy it with Tim. We'll go out. We'll do the guided hunt, and I'm the same way. I'd like to learn more, have somebody from there show me, because, you know, I feel after that, then I can probably go back to do-it-yourself hunts. But one thing for the listener, if you haven't been out there, I cannot stress enough is lighten that backpack. You don't need all the crap.
Yeah.
Because our second area, if we had to backpack 6 or 7 miles in with full packs, I would have had a hard time, because that with my day pack, with a day load, and that might have been 25 pounds, it was strenuous because we were going from 7 to 9,500 feet over a couple miles. But
looking back in
that was
hindsight,
no joke.
It was kind of a blessing that people got ill,
Right.
and we wound up in the cabin, because our original plan was to go to that second meadows,
Which was
5,
7 miles
6,
in,
7
yeah.
miles back.
That would have been a brutal
And,
hike with that.
I mean, there was some guy like you, Chris. I mean, I spent a lot of money on gear. Other guys didn't spend as much money on gear, but there was some guys that had 60, 70,
Yeah, I bet
80 pounds just in gear in their
Yeah.
pack, and you know,
I think I had to have at least 60. Mine was heavy.
yeah. Sam's pack was.
And I consider myself pretty good shape.
Jam
and that
full.
elevation with that backpack was kicking my ass. So
Yeah.
So when I turned it into a day pack, guess what? I trimmed everything. I had a big Ziploc with stupid AA batteries. I only carried like 2 or 3 AA. I trimmed everything down to make that as light as possible.
Yeah.
Totally changes your hunt.
Yeah. And so that's the next topic I want to talk about. Like, what sort of stuff did you? And so, I mean, it's kind of a tough question because you didn't really do a whole lot of legit backpack hunting. But what's like? Was there stuff in your pack? There was stuff that you brought that you thought that you have use for that was just like, man, that was a waste. I didn't need to bring that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a few things. You know, I definitely, when I was mule deer hunting, I carried too much crap around that first day. You know, I didn't need, you know, I didn't need extra. You know, water was crucial. I needed the water, but the other stuff, I didn't need all the batteries. I didn't need 7 or
What were
4
your batteries
flashlights.
for?
I just
4 flashlights.
Yeah, I'm way overboard. I'm like, you know, the best thing I had is I went to Sierra Trading Post and I bought a little headlamp. And I still use it for that little headlamp kicks butt. And that was, you got to have a headlamp. Like Brian said, you're walking in the trail in the dark. You need a headlamp.
Yep.
Yeah.
You really don't need anything else.
You got to have your hands.
But my gear was good. I only spent like $130 on boots. I had, what do you call those?
Timberlands.
I had Timberlands. They're phenomenal. My feet were a little sore after the big 14-mile hike. Like walking back, they're a little
That'll
sore.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
no matter what kind of boots you got on,
Yeah.
14 miles.
yeah, but my boots worked great. I had Eddie Bauer Guide Series pants, super lightweight, like nylon pants that worked phenomenal. I had some First Light gear, worked really well. You know, I probably didn't need to carry a lot of extra. You know, the temperatures were nice too. In the daytime, it was 70 or 80 degrees. It wasn't that bad. So, I mean, for my day pack, I didn't really carry much on this. I was prepared if we got an elk to cut up an elk and bring it back. So I didn't carry too much, but enough to accomplish that.
Right.
You know, I did have a couple extra knives. You know, I went probably some stuff I didn't need. I had 2 fixed blade, and I had a blade knife where you can switch the blades out.
Yeah.
But no, I think all the gear was pretty necessary. When you're out there, food and water is crucial. I didn't get super hungry. I think I took an MRE, I broke it down to the main meal, and then I had Ziplocs full of like trail mix, and that's pretty much what I ate. So and maybe some venison jerky. That was it.
I find the same. When you're out there, you almost have to like force yourself to stop and eat.
You do.
Because some of the days just fly by, and
Yeah, I wasn't terribly
so the
hungry.
way that I've from listening to podcasts, I think Aaron Snyder back when he was doing stuff with Brian Call, Gritty Bowman, I would listen to those guys and they would talk about breaking their meals out in one day as a bag.
Yes.
So I've done that the last 2 trips and I love that because I figure out how many calories I want to try to be between. And this is something that I think is key because I think that this is a big differentiator. Problem is it calories weigh ounces and ounces make pounds.
And ounces make pounds.
So like with me, I was eating somewhere around 3,000 calories a day, and that's a lot of food. Like you start looking at that, and I measured out all the calories in
lot.
each one of the meals and the snacks and everything I had, And Brian and Danny were both like 1,500 max.
Wow.
That's what they were doing, but they were going like they were trying to go as minimalist weight wise as possible.
Yeah.
And that's where like my approach to training and getting ready for these trips is that I want to push myself and be in great shape so that I can carry 2 pounds of food a day.
Sure.
Is what it is. So it ends up being some, 14 pounds of food you're
Sure.
carrying. But I'm not gonna.
Sure.
You got to replenish when you get to day 3 or 4 on those trips. You're emptying the tank, and your body's starting to break down, and that's where you need that nutrition. Is that third, fourth,
Yeah, the
fifth
third
day
and
of
fourth
the
day.
trip?
That's when I was getting
Yeah.
hungry.
Yeah.
And I, just to add on that, something I did different this year than I did last year was, listening to the Born and Raised guys. I tried the butthole sandwiches, the tortillas with the Nutella and the bacon and stuff.
Yeah.
I thought they were super good. I enjoy them. I eat them at home still.
Yeah.
And they were super lightweight, and you could, you can buy, I think I bought on Amazon like a package of the squeezable Nutellas,
Okay.
that almost looks like a ketchup packet,
Yep.
where you're not carrying around a big
jar.
tub, where
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
a
So
knife
it's like
to
an
spread it.
individual serving of it.
Yeah, so obviously we stayed at the lodge, so we didn't have that, but I was definitely set up where I wasn't carrying, Army MREs. I wasn't carrying those bulky, heavy things. I think the year before I brought some mountain houses, and I had a couple that I had brought with me, but again, we didn't end up getting into a situation like that. But for anybody that's listening that is going to do a do-it-yourself backcountry backpack and hunt, you got to pay attention to stuff like that. You got to do your homework, just like you're saying. Find out how many calories it's going to take you to, do some, while you're doing your training, figure out how much calories you're burning during your training, because you need to replenish those, or you will find yourself in a bad situation on the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's no doctors out there.
No, there
as,
isn't.
as all three of us sitting on
Yeah.
this couch know.
Yeah.
And have come in, we've come into situations like that.
The one nice part about when we got to the second area in the San Juan Wilderness, water was plentiful.
Yeah.
So all I had to, now I remember, I just carried my big Nalgene bottle and I had the water filter in it. I would just drink out of that and then just go over to the stream, refill it, and put the thing back on with
Did
the
you
filter.
have
I
what'd
didn't.
you use for a filter?
It was
Did you have a Sterapen?
nope, no Sterapen. It was just the filter. It comes with the cap that goes on the
Filter is right on the cap. I can't remember the
Yeah.
what's the name brand of your
I can't-
bottle?
I can't remember the. I didn't even buy the Nalgene bottle. I just bought the filters that screw on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's got a big filter and
Yeah.
that
Like a
worked good.
soy? Is it Sawyer or is it?
No, it's
It
not
don't
Sawyer.
matter. But
I can't remember the name brand.
so
but
you,
But
so
David
you,
had one
You
too.
feed the water into your Nalgene bottle, and then when you drink it, it's going through the filter. Is that how
Yeah,
that works?
Yeah.
So you just dip it in the water and try to get as
Yeah.
clean as you can. Screw it on, and that's what me and David did the whole time. We were fine.
Yeah, I think that's a good tip to people if they are planning a trip out there and trying to find
Yeah.
places.
Oh, it was Life Straw.
Water, you gotta look Life Straw.
Life Straw. Yeah, that's what it is.
You gotta. I mean, you can go to an area like you were talking, Brian, that is high desert. There's animals there, but water is life. Like,
It is-
Oh, yeah.
Water was crucial.
fine-
there.
Oh yeah.
if you're planning a trip and you're looking, like, try to find an area where there's a creek that
Yep.
Yeah.
you're looking on Google Earth, but it
A
shouldn't
predominant
just be like
one that's
a
there
picture, right?
year round.
Yeah, you don't want like
Yes.
a picture that's showing you that there's a creek there. You want
Right.
to find something that's got like an established creek.
Yeah.
Maybe it's named.
Yes.
Because those are great spots to camp near, so that
Yep.
you've got active running
Yeah.
water. And this year was a great year in the Rockies because they had so much snow in Colorado last year.
Yeah,
In
with
the
all the
winter, that
runoff,
there
yeah.
was a lot of runoff.
Yeah,
the water was
the second
really good.
unit we went to, there was tons of water around. Yeah.
Yeah.
I run a the Sawyer filter, and then I turn around and Sterapen my
Sterapen
Nalgene
too.
bottle too. Yeah.
yeah,
I do both.
I did the research on this Life Straw, and it said it filters everything out. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, that's the one I'm going to roll with. And then I went to not Gander Mountain. I went to Field and Stream on the way out of town and bought David one. Same type of device, just a big bottle.
we couldn't get any more sick than we already were.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Me and Brian were the only ones who
Maybe
Yeah,
a
we were
little-
the only. You and I were the only
I
ones
felt
that were
great the
good.
whole
I
time.
felt good
Maybe
the
a
whole
little
time
beaver
too.
fever would have done everybody good. But I'm a big fan. So like talking water systems, I just run 2 Nalgene bottles with they're made by Human Gear, the cap, and then I use the Sterapen Classic, and that thing fits perfectly into the cap. So I'm always, if I walk by a stream, I'm filling up both my 32 ounce Nalgene bottles.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
You're always running it. Try to always stay at 32 ounces of water, and that's it.
Yeah.
I don't have
Yeah.
water at camp. I don't have water anywhere else. I got my water
Yep.
right on me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something I did different this year. The year before, I ran one 32 ounce and a Camelback.
Yeah.
But this year, I ran just a 32 ounce Nalgene. But then I turned around and bought a 16 ounce Nalgene. But
Those are
the
nice.
cap
Yeah.
doesn't fit on that.
Oh, really?
No, but it's something. It's nice because you can. I got a small little pocket it's kind of tight fitting for a 32 ounce on the side of my pack. So the 16 ounce slides right
Are
in
you
there.
still
So
running that Sitka pack, or what do you have?
no, I have. Well, it's Sitka camouflage. It's the subalpine camouflage, but it's made by Mystery Ranch.
Oh, you got a Mystery Ranch.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's a nice pack. I'll be honest with you. If I was to do it all over again, I probably would go with a Cafaro
Yeah.
or an XO pack, only because the Mystery Ranch completely empty is like 6.7 or 6.8 pounds. So it's a little on the heavy side of those $400 or $500 packs. You know what I mean? I
Right.
could have probably spent another $40 or $50 and went
Is that an
with a
internal
Cafaro
frame
or
pack, or is that an external frame pack?
it's internal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the meat shelf in it.
I love the.
Yeah, I didn't like my pack too much. Mine was, and I knew it was a cheap.
I could have told
Cabela's.
you that, but you were fired up about it, so I didn't want to
Yeah.
shoot your.
But my pack would have been great if we had gotten it out because it had the huge meat shelf. I mean, I think it would have performed well, but
Yeah.
it was just not the greatest, and it had these little clips that held everything
They
together.
make
Clips
noise.
So
I mean,
Danny had the same pack, and I mean it
does the
did,
job.
It did the job, but when it gets down to if you're gonna do this, and I've got a Cafaro pack, and I use the thing all
All the
whitetail
time.
season.
Yeah.
And I bought a couple different bags for it, and that's the beauty of having an external frame pack. From any of these companies is that you can buy different bags for it,
right.
and you can use it for all different types of things.
Right.
They're very versatile for that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it was quite the experience, quite a learning experience. Had a great time regardless. I mean, it was fun to go out with friends and to have David there. And I look forward to the next one. It's not something that, like you said, I probably won't do a ton of them, but I definitely would like to go again.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't even care about gun. I want to get an elk with my bow. That's like my dream.
Yeah.
Is to get one during the rut with a bow. So hopefully in a couple of years we'll make it happen.
that would be
know?
awesome. Yeah.
And next time it's cheaper. I don't have to buy all the gear. I mean, I really have all the gear now. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you bite the bullet, and
Yeah.
when you were talking about your gear, I think that's something important to lay out is that you didn't. I mean, all in. What do you think? I mean, let's not talk about your bow because you went out and bought a new bow.
yeah, I spent a lot on the bow,
But all together, with the stuff that you purchased for this trip, what do you think you had into it?
yeah, I didn't go super expensive. I mean, with the binos, I'll include the cooler. I bought a really nice cooler. I bought the binos. I bought the shoes. I bought the Guide Series pants. It was probably under $1,000 in gear.
Yeah.
When you add it all up, nice binoculars, decent backpack, decent shoes, decent clothes to wear. I bought some First Light. It was probably around $1,000.
Yeah.
Just in all the gear.
But that stuff that you buy the right stuff, you only have
I'm
to
gonna
buy
keep
it
using
once.
it, and I've been using it during deer season.
Yeah.
I used all that First Light in the Guide Series pants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used it. I did buy some of the Gators. So yeah, I mean, $1,000, $1,000 on a bow. I spent $1,000 on tags.
Right.
So I think next time I'm just going for one animal, not two. I mean, either it's gonna be mule deer or elk, so probably gonna be elk.
Yeah, it's really cool to have two tag.
It is cool.
I did the same thing this year, and it was like, well, we might as well have both of them. But it's like, squirrel.
Yeah, which way-
exactly.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Especially when you're hunting them both. Like yours was kind of like that was kind of crazy because you had 5 days to hunt, and you had two different tags, one for one unit, and then the other you could use wherever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not going to say that I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah.
But it's definitely
You got to do your focus.
when we had 5 guys, everybody
He's got multiple
4 out of the
tags.
5 had multiple
And-
tags, and then everybody's trying to do all these different things, and it's just
And
confuses.
I kept telling these guys, and especially the people that are listening, the hardest thing about elk hunting is finding them.
Yeah.
It could take you 2 hours to find them. It could take you
5
your
days.
whole entire 5 days
Yeah.
or 7 days, 9 days of hunting to find them.
Yeah.
So that was, that was the biggest challenge, was locating them.
We're very
then
lucky we found him at the end.
We are super lucky.
I mean-
we were super lucky.
Yeah. Like I said, it's not to awesome hunting. I mean, yeah, we have good hunting skills, but I'm just walking a trail calling.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
happen to get one fired up. I always look at it like turkey hunting. You got to be a little vocal. They want to talk that time of year. And,
Yep.
his buddy Sam just kept laughing. He's like, man, Chris, they just love that cow call. He's like, you were sweet talking them. I'm like, well, that's all I know how to do really good. So
yeah, sweet talk.
hopefully they don't want me to bugle.
Nice.
But their bugle didn't sound so
What
good.
else you want to cover?
I don't know. We're at almost
So-
2 hours.
So, well, I told you guys what I'm thinking in 2 years going back. When are you going back?
So, but originally we had a lot more guys that were supposed to go on this past year's hunt, and I really want to go out west with my brothers. My 2 brothers want to go out. They unfortunately weren't able to go, and I think the plan is we're going to do another do-it-yourself backpack hunt. Sam is all in again.
Really?
So is Joe. Of course, Joe just, him and his wife had a baby, so they got the young family thing going again.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure 2021 we're looking at going back to Colorado, probably around the same area, the second area that we went to. We got some other different drainages that we have in mind that we want to hunt, but I think my 2 brothers want to experience kind of what we experienced going out there. But definitely something I will do different for those that are listening. If you're gonna go out, and I wish I had talked to you, Billy, sooner than what I did, planning this past hunt, is I definitely will apply for a muzzleloader tag.
Yeah.
And if I don't get drawn in the muzzleloader draw, then I'll just turn around and buy an over-the-counter tag.
Yeah.
Because looking back on a hindsight, I had a 5x5 elk jump across the trail in front of me
You
at
easily
50,
coulda.
60 yards.
That's true. That's a
where
good
I
point.
was in the lead. Safety comes into play, but I probably could have been the hunter that had a primer in with a loaded muzzleloader and probably could have got a decent shot at
Right.
a bull at 75, 80
it's
yards with a muzzleloader.
Putting a
you know?
muzzleloader in your hands
true.
is a game
So-
changer. Yeah.
It looking back, I kind of wish I did put in for the draw for muzzleloader, and if I didn't get it, I didn't get it. But I would have turned around and just bought it over the counter tag anyway. So if any of the people that are listening, if that's when you're thinking about going for an over the counter archery hunt, just put in for the draw. It
Can't hurt if you get the muzzle.
it costs a little bit more money because you have to buy that qualifying license.
But
in the end, if
know
you
you're
don't get
going either
drawn-
way, it doesn't make a difference. You have to buy the qualifying
Exactly.
license.
If you know you're going anyway, spend the extra money, the $80 for that qualifying license, and then if you don't get drawn, you turn around, buy it over the counter
it
archery
sound-
tag, and you're going anyway. So
It sounds like there's a lot going on in Colorado right now. I listened to the last couple of podcasts with Aaron Snyder on Kufaru.
yeah, there's some
Kufaru
changes.
cast, and there's
it
some
sounds
changes
like.
coming, which I don't
Yeah.
think are bad. But
Yeah.
if you're not in right now buying your points,
Yes.
I certainly recommend that you get started because
Yep.
there's a lot of these areas that it's not going to be. They may have caps on how many over the counter tags there are,
Yeah.
which I think is good because it is getting a bit out of hand. And this is a whole nother conversation, but just what I've witnessed and some of the things I've listened to, some of those areas are getting recreated to death.
Yes.
There is nonstop action in there between winter recreation, summer recreation, fall. Every season, those animals are getting pressured.
Yeah.
And then you add a hunting season where you've got
Right.
every Johnny from across the country
Well-
is saying, I want to go elk hunting. The best and the easiest way to get opportunities is
Right.
to go to Colorado.
Yeah.
Like, we are some of those people, but it's a great place to go. But honestly listening and hearing some of the people from that state that live there, and it's like that's their resource too, as well as it's ours, but it's their resource too. It's like, how would I feel if we had, come opening day of deer season or the entire deer season here, we had just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hunters pouring into our state.
Yeah.
And just
No, it's true.
not caring what they shoot, all this.
Yep.
By no means does that make it, it's got to be a trophy thing, but it's like, you got to kind of think about what are we doing to that herd and all the different dynamics that play into it. So I'm very interested to see what comes of that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get back out there. And you asked, what, I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I'm intrigued with what you guys are doing with
Maybe
the
you'll
elk
go with
hunt.
us, yeah.
So I might join you guys, but then if I'm not doing that, I think there's a good chance that we're going to be back up in where we were this year for mule deer, because I just can't. It's funny, like elk, I've seen them. I've been in there. I've been within range of them, but there's just something about mule deer. I don't know. I don't know if I'm just a deer nut or what, but those, I can't stop thinking about mule deer. It's not, I'm not sitting here at home thinking, man, I can't wait to chase elk again. It's like, I just want to shoot another mule deer.
That's good. That's what it should be.
Just,
you got to hunt the animal that, that excites
It definitely becomes an obsession.
Yeah.
It's a ton of fun, and you can never get enough of it. Just like whitetail hunting. Those people listening that are thinking about just getting into hunting for the first time, once you do it, you won't ever turn back and not do it again.
Right. And don't take all these conversations, especially most of what we have on this podcast is people that have been in it for a long time and are completely engulfed and obsessed with it. But if you can only get out 2 or 3 days a year, just go try it. It is just incredible. And on the last podcast with Jesse, he said, you just got to get out there and experience waking up or watching the sunrise.
Watching the woods come alive.
There's just if you haven't experienced it, you can go out and sit in your driveway and watch the sunrise. It's not the same as climbing up in a tree or sitting at the bottom of a tree and nothing knows you're there. And you just let the woods wake up around you. So I don't care whether you're doing that here in Western New York or you're doing it at 12,000 feet in the Rockies. There's just nothing like it.
It's very cool.
Nothing like it.
There's not.
So important question for you, Brian. You a better wrestler than Jesse Coots, or did you whoop his ass?
Did you guys wrestle together?
We did wrestle.
Did you?
We did. We wrestled. I want to. Man, it's been a long time since.
Sounds like a guy who got beat up a few times.
2 or 3 times. I think I beat him once, maybe twice. I think we wrestled maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
We were kind of. We were in the same weight class, then we weren't in the same weight class. But we wrestled each other 2 or 3 times, maybe 4. But it was we were kind of even.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah. You two are you're the same build, you're the same
Jesse's a great guy. I haven't seen him in years. But to see him that he's got a hunting platform like Pertnier's got. Of course, I follow him on social media, and he's got a great family. He's got a great attitude on life.
Yeah.
Great business that he runs, and it's just he's a community guy.
Yeah.
And he puts himself out there. He's an old school guy, and
his energy is you can't match that energy, and it's contagious.
Yeah.
And you meet the guy and you start talking to him, and
you could talk to him for a week straight and still not
and
get
I don't know
all
where
the
he gets
information.
all his energy. I mean,
I know.
I watch him. He's like, I'm not really big into social media. It's like he's replying to every post and giving all these. God, how are you doing this? 3 kids and running a business, but he's a passionate guy, and that's one of the benefits of doing this podcast so far is just meeting, whether it be meeting a guy like Jesse and connecting the dots, or Todd Waldron. I just really enjoy meeting Todd, and you guys. I think you both listened to his podcast, and I was listening to the podcast he posted today. I can't even I listen to all the same stuff that he's talking about, and I've heard it, but he just presents it in such a manner, so it's just there's so many great people right now
Advocate.
not only nationally, but just here in New York, we've got some great people that are doing some really good things.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
And
It's nice to
fun.
see. It is. It is. It's nice to see. So what's next for Pert Near?
I don't know. I'm gonna
Sounds like
record another podcast or something.
the National Wildlife Turkey Federation banquet's
Yeah, we're gonna
coming
go
up,
spend
right?
hundreds of dollars to support
Hope-
NWTF.
hopefully we'll win another gun.
Yeah, so we're gonna pretty excited about that banquet coming up. So
that's
that's
a big deal.
end of March is the NWTF banquet for the Crossroad Limb Hangers. That's the kind of like the Lima Honeoye
Yeah.
area chapter.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That should be a really good time. So on later this week, I'm gonna be recording a podcast with Brian.
Who, Godfrey?
Brian Gottfried, yeah. So
Nice.
he's
Oh, cool.
he's the regional coordinator for NWTF. So
Yeah,
we're gonna
yeah.
get into all kinds of stuff with that.
Oh, good.
But yeah, like it's just a great time, and it's unfortunate because there's these banquets are all over the place, and it's like most people can't afford to go to multiple of these banquets. Like
Yeah.
you do one,
You do
like
one,
that's
that's
your
it.
one banquet
Yeah.
a year
Yeah.
because they're a good time. You don't have to go spend a ton of money, but I love going and
Yeah.
bidding on auctions and doing all this stuff. But like QDMA, they've got one right before earlier in March. The Rochester chapter of QDMA
really?
has got one, and I'd love to participate in that, but I can't justify it. I'm gonna tell my wife I'm gonna go spend another $250 doing something like that, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's just so many good organizations out there, and as I want to talk, I'm trying to get more and more of that information out there about these things that are going on. Whether there's 40 people listening or 100 people or 1,000, I don't really care. Just people in this area get engaged with whatever organization
Yeah.
aligns with you,
Yeah.
Right.
because we're all fighting for the right things. We're trying to, grow people in the outdoors, keep our heritage alive. It's important. And
It's a dying breed. Dying
Yep.
sport.
Yeah.
Dying breed, yeah.
yep. And that's for a plug for Todd. He just posted a podcast today. Check it out. He's talking a lot about like the hunting and conservation history and how a lot of it is coming full circle, that now we're starting to fight again for our public lands and
Yeah.
for our right to hunt and bear arms and all the things that go along with that.
Sure.
And he does a great job of explaining that. I could never regurgitate what he does the way he does, but it's up to us. Like, you guys are my father's generation. It's up to my generation now to step
Sure.
into the back end
Yeah,
of
to
that
carry it
and
on.
support it and carry it on. So
Well,
Yeah.
you're doing a good job at it.
You are. Certainly are.
Pert near.
Pert
So
near.
every time we sit down, we could talk for like 2.5, 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
Good
thanks
talk. Good
thanks
talk
for giving us
hours.
this
Yes,
opportunity.
again, thanks for having us on. And
We'll get on and do this
We'll,
again sometime.
Yeah. Future hunts, future
maybe
adventures.
we should do one after the banquet extravaganzas.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
Uh,
See how it goes. If we,
I don't know if we could top last year's banquet.
no,
man,
We had a lot of guns
did.
and tree stands
we
and
might not be invited back if we win again like we did last
Yeah.
year. So, all right, boys.
okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
thank you.
yes, thank you.
Glad you had a good trip, and we'll circle back around one of these days.
Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Billy.